Welcome everybody to the Westwood Planning Board. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. My name is Brian Gorman and I will be chairing the meeting.
Put the microphone on.
Can you hear? How's that? Right. So welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. My name is Brian Gorman and I will be chairing this meeting. The meeting is video recorded by Westwood Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so the audience is aware. Seeing none. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes no clapping, booing, or interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be requested to leave the meeting. The format of the meeting will be when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments. The board members will ask questions of the applicant. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not a public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board. When it is time for the public comment period, the chair will call those wishing to speak to the podium to use the microphone. Once at the podium, you can please address any comments or questions to the chair with a time limit of 2 minutes. Please direct all comments and questions through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. Abby, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, you had 2 requests for continuances. Number 3, that's the public hearing for 85 Burgess Avenue. They are still working on submitting revised plans to you, and they request a continuance to your next meeting on Tuesday, February 11th at 7 p.m. in this room at Carby Street.
Okay.
And then item number 4, the open space and recreation plan. We're still compiling information to get back to you as requested by the state. So we request more time and request that hearing be continued to your Tuesday, March 17th meeting at 7 p.m. in this room.
Yeah, and is there any way that the board could get updates on that? We've just been forwarding it forward, and we do have the comments from the state.
Yes.
But just maybe when we get to that point, maybe we can just have a quick summary about what are we waiting for? Thanks.
For us to compile them and get them back to you. So
Yeah,
it's been.
Yeah, so I was wondering if there was any hanging fruit there. So should we move to continue item 3 to start off? So a motion for that?
To make a motion to continue 85 Burgess Avenue to February 11th, Carby Street, 7 p.m.
Right. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody object? Abstain? So that passes 5-0. Item 1 on the agenda, so zoning amendment article work session. So if we could pull the articles up on the board and then we could talk through it. We had the FinCom meeting last week, so that was the introduction to the zoning articles themselves. We talked through some of those items and we received some feedback. Most of them were in question form, so for further investigation. So I thought for the best use of time for this is to go through each article similar to what we did before, have each planning board member provide any questions or comments, and whether or not they support the article so that we can move this forward. The next FinCom meeting is next Tuesday, so at that time, the articles in more detail will be provided to them. When I look through some of these articles, some I still have questions about whether or not I still support it, and some of them I still need to investigate to find out, because some of them have different ways that you can go about modifying them. So with further ado, let's do Article 1. So this is zoning amendment to regulate short-term rentals. So zoning bylaw amendment to include a new definition for short-term rental and long-term rental, and then adding any types of regulations to short-term rentals. So at the previous meeting, one of the ideas here was to limit the number, so have a short-term rental where it has to be greater than 1 day. So for this, Deb, do you want to start off at your side of the table?
So I think that this is worth looking into a little bit more. I don't think we have any information as to how it's regulated, what the Board of Health requirements would be for that in terms of the short-term rentals, and whether, permitting should be required. Just a few thoughts.
Okay. So you're saying, and I did notice that too, some other towns, it becomes a Board of Health issue when you have short-term rentals, to ensure that that rental is registered, and part of registration is making sure that it has a cleaning, the proper cleaning,
Correct.
so that you don't get into Board of Health type items. Dave?
So I thought about this some more, and I just don't see a zoning amendment here that, and I think that if we want to regulate this, I think it would require more of a discussion with the select board maybe. Because a lot of this, you're talking about defining uses, defining what goes there. That would be the role of the zoning, but a lot of this is how does it relate to Board of Health, like how,
Yeah.
it's more of a business regulation than it is a land use regulation, I think. And so I don't think it's there, so I'm not really supportive of it.
Okay. And then Bill?
Yeah, I think we probably want to have inspections, and we want people to register if they're going to be renting their homes. I mean, as it stands now, they could rent it by the hour. There's nothing that stops somebody from renting it by the hour in a residential neighborhood. So we really have to put some teeth into this. So we do need inspections, and I think fees should be attached to it. I know we still have to work on the wording and how we're going to do that, but I'm definitely in favor of making this a zoning bylaw. It's just in our neighborhood, someone bought a house just to make it an Airbnb, so it's a business. So you regulate businesses, and this is they're going into neighborhoods and people are just buying a house and then they're turning it into an Airbnb, or they could even rent it by the hour, like I said, whatever they want. We have nothing stopping them from doing that now, so I think we really have to look at this.
Okay, and Chris?
I would agree with Mr. Atkins that I don't see this as a zoning situation. I stated in our last meeting also, currently we have over 6,000 homes in our town, and we have 6 houses on Airbnb being listed for rooms or whole house or whatever. I don't see this as a problem right now to explore, especially through zoning amendment, so I would not be in support of this.
And so I'm going to continue my research with this. There's a number of towns that are dealing with this at this point in time, and even if it's a town where sometimes they don't have as many Airbnbs, they want to get ahead of an issue so that they can be proactive. So I'll look into this, and then what I'll do is I'll present it to, I'm looking forward for FinCom and public input for this one, to see if there are any affected neighbors, how they deal with that. So moving forward, number 2, so this is zoning map amendment relative to Morrison Park and Field. So the summary for this one is that the Morrison Field was zoned as a local business B, and then it was converted to an FMUOD zoning. So in looking at the town zoning and the zoning map, we noticed that And so same format. Deb, do you want to provide your input on this?
Sure. So there's a lot of crossover between the FMUOD1 uses and the LBB uses. And regardless of whether it's kept in the FMUOD/LBB, they can still develop under either. The only real difference would be residential. And based on the density of that area and the traffic rating, how much density do we want to put in there? And do we want to consider, if it goes up, if it were to be sold, it would be more attractive as housing versus a business? And how much, do we really want to lose that field?
Okay. Dave?
So I think this is okay. I mean, it makes sense to carve out the recreational parts of the town. I would observe that if it were sold, that would require a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And if they wanted to sell it, if people really wanted to convert it to some kind of business use, the same 2/3 vote would apply. So also by removing it from the FMUOD, I mean, the underlying zoning is local business 1, so that's all it's doing is removing the possibility of the planning board reviewing a project. But I think it's fine. Let's take it out of the FMUOD, and maybe there's some future zoning that we want to carve out recreational parts of the town or something.
Okay. And Bill?
Yeah, I think originally it was included by mistake in the FMUOD, and I think we should just bring it back to what it should be.
And Chris?
I know it sounds counterintuitive to include it in FMUOD, but as Mr. Atkins pointed out, it's protected by twice it needs to be voted on by 2/3 of the town in order for something to get built up there, residents. If the only option is local business B, then if the select board elects to lease out the land, they can put up a by right building and it never gets to town meeting vote. So the FMUOD actually gives us our only real protection by town vote to put up a special permit project. So I don't see how putting this through is going to protect the field from, or the park from any development happening on it. I think it has plenty of protection right now.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, there was a question at the FinCom last week about when this was adopted, when the overlay for the area was adopted in 2014. The FMUD was overlaid around all those properties along that Washington East Street, School Street corridor there, over the local business district. So it was just applied over it, and I believe this parcel was included largely because of the fire station. The fire station was one of the early projects that did go through the planning board process at that time as a special permit. But with that special permit, the lot was carved out. So the fire station is now on a separate parcel than Morrison Field.
Thank you. So then, Article number 3, so this is a zoning argument relative to prohibitive language, so adding language to make the bylaw a prohibitive bylaw for uses not mentioned. This would include adding language to specify the uses not specifically mentioned within the bylaw are prohibited or established. So we did determine that there is some prohibitive language within the bylaws, so that's good.
Yes. We did see in, what was it, section 1 of the bylaw, section 1.4, where it talks about how to apply the zoning bylaw, there is a sentence that says, "No building, structure, or land shall be used for any purpose or in any manner other than is expressly permitted within the district in which such building, structure, or land is located." So we do have that language in there. It doesn't go into a whole lot of depth if you're looking to do something more, but generally now the practice is the building commissioner is the zoning interpretation officer, and when new uses come in, he asks for a description of their business and tries to see what zoning use category it falls into. And so if it did not fall into any one of the categories, he would have to make his determination. And if it's denied, then the applicant would have the option of going to the zoning board of appeals and presenting their case
Yeah, that's
as an appeal, right?
Yeah, it's nice that we have that language in. So I'm going to, so I found that out from you recently, so I haven't had time to look into what other towns have added, so I'll see if there's any other language. And if there's any language that you would recommend that might also buttress that a little bit. But it is nice that we have that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
And do you need a microphone?
Oh.
Or yes.
Yeah, so you have a situation where you have some protection now that allows you some flexibility to move on things you don't anticipate. So I would urge you to cautiously think about being more prohibitive than we are right now.
Yeah, and I was saying even like a little bit, even if it's not prohibitive, like more specific, as far as like procedures even.
It's never going to come to you for an interpretation. It's probably always got to go to the building commissioner.
Thank you.
Procedures don't need to go through town process, right? Building department?
Not that I'm aware.
Involving town meeting.
Yeah, and you might want to have a discussion with him how he looks at things, just so you have a better understanding. No, it just may tie your hands more. The more specific you get about prohibitive language, the less you can do versus that prohibitive language. It's kind of a common sense approach. You have something that seems to me to be working very well. We don't have a lot of bad uses coming into areas of town that we don't want them. So to try and get stricter on that may tie your hands on something we may want to do later on.
Chris, do you have anything additional?
No.
Okay. Bill?
Well, when I look at this prohibitive, the Airbnbs, for example,
Separate category.
okay, but it didn't prohibit that.
Nope.
Okay. Just-
But we do have a section under accessory uses in the zoning bylaw that talks about the renting of rooms. It says that a resident property owner can rent to no more than 3 unrelated individuals.
Dave?
So I think that this was originally, it was a possible solution to the fact that we had some uses we didn't want to have happen, and they weren't specified, we couldn't get it figured out, so we thought we could just say prohibited by law, and that'll cover us. But I don't think it adds that much over what we already have.
Right.
I feel like it's kind of, and like Pat's saying, it's going to tie our hands, and it just doesn't add as much of a protection as we'd
Yeah.
like. The real issue is that if we have something we know that we want to protect from our neighborhood, then we should define where it goes, figure out how to do that so that it's in a good place. And then there'll be when something like that comes to town, there's a place for it, as opposed to just trying to tighten everything up to be very prohibitive and try to
Yeah.
resist everything, and then hope they still can apply for it and appeal and everything.
And the language I was looking for was that, the language that we currently have, I just,
So I'm kind of thinking we don't need this now. It's my
Mr. Chairman, I think a prime example of this is the firearms issue that you're looking at taking up, if not the next item, somewhere down the line. You've identified areas that you don't want it in now, and we'll see if we can get the Attorney General to agree with us as we move forward. We'll have the benefit of seeing what happens with the Dedham zoning changes before town meeting, but I'm hopeful that the new Attorney General, who seems to have a very strict approach on gun laws, that will allow us to restrict zoning on that.
great, thank you. And Deb?
So Pat, just to be clear, so if it's not listed as a use in our bylaws. Under 1.4, we are protected.
Not completely, but you're pretty much protected because the building commissioner is going to have to take a look at that and see if he thinks it's an allowed use where it's going to go. And if it's an allowed use, he'd let it move forward. If it's not allowed use, he'd tell them it's not allowed use, and they could move for a variance. It's impossible to legislate out generally everything you want to legislate out, no matter how diligent you are. Brandeis couldn't write a prohibitive regulation that would do that for you. Certainly I can't if Brandeis can't.
So the next item, so Article 4. So as was alluded to earlier, so it's a zoning amendment relative to firearms. So currently in the town of Westwood, the bylaw through the Zoning Board of Appeals allows for firearms sales for business in local business A, local business B, industrial, and highway business zones. So in looking at this, this was looked at in a more keen eye after the Dedham situation where they had different issues with their zoning. So the proposal here is to make a modification to the zones to remove local business A and local business B. So that's High Street and Washington Street. So that would still allow for industrial and highway business. So same, Chris, do you want to start off?
Again, I just asked Mr. Ahern to reiterate, are we going down a path prematurely at this point, given what's happening in our neighboring town of Dedham? Or should we wait and see what happens with the Attorney General?
Well, if the Attorney General doesn't like it, they're going to let us know within 90 days of town meeting if it passes. So, and we're probably going to know towards the end of March once they rule on the Dedham zoning and we take a look at their decision. If this is what you want to do, if you think it's the right thing to do for the town of Westwood, I don't have a problem you putting this on the warrant and running it through town meeting.
And then Bill.
Yeah, I have no problem being proactive and going down this road.
Dave?
Yeah, I'd support this. I don't think we need to invite firearm sales to High Street or Washington Street, and we've got other places that'll work just fine.
Thanks. And Deb?
I agree, I support it.
Okay, so moving forward, so now we're at zoning text and map amendments relative to medical uses. So, so this is a complicated article. Currently,
I watched the FinCom meeting and our last meeting. It appeared nothing was happening with regard to this. So if the board would indulge me, I came up working with Pat Ahern and Nora Locknane, some ideas of how we can answer this question, which has been out there for a while now, and protect our town. And if the board would just consider these ideas.
I can't go through this right now.
Well, that's what I'd like to do. I've got a quick PowerPoint presentation with the general ideas behind this article language.
sure.
And I apologize for cutting you off, but it struck me that as we left it last time, our board was not prepared to do any action on this particular item. First off, a lot of the issues we got to before, and just to reiterate, this particular article was passed in 2017 by a fall town meeting. And through some procedural defects, it was pretty much rescinded by the Attorney General. So in the interim, we tried to answer some issues behind our use chart and where this was going to go. questions that came up that had not come up in previous deliberations from the board. And what we found was the definitions we were trying to come up with were kind of getting off topic, and we were trying to prohibit use in areas through new definitions. So using that logic, what we decided to do was go back to the language for two of the uses that we're talking about that were approved by the planning board and the town in fall of 2017. And those uses are for, or those definitions are for medical center or clinic, and office of healthcare professional. We have already utilizing medical center or clinic and office of healthcare professional down at University Avenue Multi-Use District, or UAMUD. And I don't see a reason why we need to alter significantly those definitions or at all in practice. And the two other issues that are part of this are related to a hospital and a substance rehabilitation or treatment facility. And we have the definitions that we've come up with that I hope the board finds favorable. They're up here for the room to see up on each board. A hospital is a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients that includes overnight care facilities and that is not a substance rehabilitation or treatment facility. And we go on to define what is a substance rehabilitation or treatment facility. That is a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients for substance rehabilitation and/or treatment. Neither of these definitions appear in any of our bylaws right now. And that's why I think the board felt 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, it was important to address then, and going to identifying what these definitions are is the first part of this article. Now, now that we've identified what these things are, we get to the creation in our town of a medical use overlay district, or MFOD. And we had talked on this board last time we addressed this issue back at the Downey School meeting, I think last March, about possibly separating out the ARO zones where it had originally been approved by the town at East Street and or Louderbrook. And thinking this through, it makes more sense, instead of to separate them out, to instead create a medical use overlay district for University Avenue, and not the entire section, and we'll address that, but also then for the Louderbrook section and Fox Hill Village section of that ARO. So it involves 2 parcels of land up at the ARO up in that area. So we couldn't be accused of spot zoning. It's a multiple area to be considered, or it can be, an applicant could choose to select a University Avenue multi-use district. Let's go to the next slide. This shows what the underlying zoning is, the overlay districts, what they are. WCOD is Wireless Communication Overlay District, and that would not change. That's essentially cell tower possibilities to be built at that area that exists today. Next slide. So the East Street ARO area, which was the hot topic a year ago, would remain unchanged and would not be eligible for a hospital or a substance rehabilitation facility through a special permit. The only ARO that would be eligible for these hospital or substance rehabilitation facility would be up as was indicated before, up at the Louderbrook Fox Hill Village address.
Oops, sorry.
And the MFOD down at, this
sorry,
shows,
sorry.
I'm sorry, no, that goes back, that's helpful. To delineate, there is a parcel, and most people are probably aware of it, right at the entrance to this, there's a yellow building. I believe it's a medical or a dental facility. That is specifically kept out of this medical facility overlay district, so nothing could be built there for these purposes. It would only involve Fox Hill Village area and Louderbrook. And again, the reason being is these two parcels are heavily built, and we don't expect anyone to be able to come in and build a hospital here. But that yellow building site does have room for something to be constructed there. So we're specifically keeping that item, that parcel out of this overlay district. Down at University, we have the overlay here, the MFOD. It basically covers, if you go to the next, I believe the next slide, it covers Del Frisco's, the Marriott, Not Your Average Joe's, Brigham and Women's, and then that other parcel that's currently being built across from the Gables. So that would be the only area down in the University Ave area that a hospital or medical treatment facility could be built. Here's the use chart updated. Medical center, if you notice, Office of Healthcare Professional remains unchanged. Medical center or clinic largely remains unchanged, except if you see it's acceptable in the industrial, which is the University Ave area, and there's a note there. It's really tough to see, but it's the numeral 8, the number 8, and it indicates at the bottom that it's acceptable under provision of Section 9.7 University Ave. And then hospital and substance rehabilitation facility, the use chart indicates that they are only available to be built under the MFOD district in either the University Ave area or the ARO area indicated by way of the MFOD. So again, the East Street ARO area of Meditrek by the Norfolk Golf Course would not be permissible under this particular bylaw. Other thoughts we had, Abby? Well, other thoughts were that, well, we'll move on to criteria. 300-foot setback, and these can be added to or if board members choose. 300 feet setback from residential use property, maximum building height of 60 feet. Demonstrate that proposed facility will not have a negative effect on surrounding properties or will not have a negative financial or fiscal effect on the town. Those last two are pretty much standard for special permits currently. It is also thought that this particular bylaw would be overseen by a special permit by the Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA. In addition to that, so they would need permission from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they would also need permission by special permit of the Planning Board, or EIDR of the Planning Board, and any other issues that may come up with hazardous waste or things like that. So it would actually need the full permission of the Zoning Board and the Planning Board. So it's a use that we think is very sensitive, all of these uses, and for that reason, we think that the best approach would be to have the most eyes on this as possible. And that would mean filing with the Zoning Board as well as the Planning Board. And if they get a no from either board, then they can't move forward with the proposal. So that is, in a nutshell, sorry for the long nutshell, but that is our thoughts on how we can protect our town as we currently aren't, and we haven't been since this was rescinded from our 2017 town meeting. So I know it wasn't short, but it's a little meaty, this topic, but I hate to kick this down the road further. When we started talking about zoning articles, I did identify that this was the one I think needs serious attention by the planning board. So I hope my board members will consider. I'm not saying we have all the answers right now, but this is my submission for consideration for this particular article for the planning board.
Thanks, Chris. The question that I have is the Lauterbrook Road, the choice, you said that wanting to avoid being accused of spot zoning, is that the reason for the two locations?
Well, it makes it a little easier to defend when we're coming up with zoning, instead of targeting just one address in our town to say, this is where you can build a hospital. It may not be defendable by the town to say, if an applicant comes in and says, I can't build it here, it's just not physically possible. So your zoning is, in effect, keeping my use out. By doing this, we're not keeping the use out. We're giving them plenty, I think it's upwards of 10 acres in those two parcels of land, or maybe even more. There's plenty of room for an applicant to do what they say they want to do, but given what Fox Hill has invested and that office building at Lauterbrook, we don't really see any possibility that they're going to be demolished anytime soon and rebuilt. I think a developer would just go on their way instead of incurring these particular, having to pass two boards and buy this plot of land. So we don't see it happening anytime soon. If it happens at university, we already have it in place with our, for the other things. The medical treatment and the hospital are new, but they would also be into the MFOD, but in those 4 parcels that are down at university.
Great.
But that's the thinking behind it. We give them a large piece. They can't say we kind of boxed them out.
Thank you. So I'm gonna do some reading on this. Thank you for presenting that.
Thank you for your time.
Dave, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. This is, obviously we want to read through everything in more detail, but it does pick up where we left off in a positive way. I think it solves the whole problem, or it outlines dealing with all the issues that we originally were trying to deal with. And so I think it's worth studying, and it's in the form that will be, we can put it out there and get comment on this. It's like we picked up where we left off in a positive way, so I think it's great.
Deb?
So were these put out there for the residents as well, or?
I don't know.
No, not yet, just
Okay.
what we have.
I look forward to reading this. It's very well detailed. The only thing I do want to say is I hope that all the articles are afforded the same level of help and assistance, and certain articles aren't being cherry-picked in terms of assistance.
Yep, I did not help.
I'm going to
and
put
Bill?
these over here for the
Yeah,
residents.
can we have a copy of the maps?
Yeah, the PowerPoint, just share the PowerPoint.
Yeah. And this is presented by you, Nora, Pat, and Abby, is it?
No,
I'm guessing-
Nora and Pat, I vetted this through and worked with and made sure that I wasn't doubling up efforts and.
Okay.
Right.
Just asking.
Well, we had worked on it last year and the year before. When after it went to town meeting 2017, we brought it up again in 2018, but didn't take it all the way through to town meeting. So we had a lot of these definitions.
Yeah, just different overlays and. Thank you. So the next article under discussion, if you wanted to switch over to that. So number 6, so this is zoning amendment related to energy efficiency. So this is a zoning amendment to include requirements for sustainable practices and energy efficiency in planning board application reviews for environmental impact and design reviews in section 7.3 and various special permits. To add to the bylaws that all new municipal projects include an alternative energy component such as solar panels. So again, the choice for municipal buildings, something that the town controls, under spending. We've discussed in the past making requirements of applicants, but that seems to be a little bit more challenging. Dave, do you have an update on where we are with the WEAC article?
So that's kind of, so the WEAC article is to get a non-binding warrant article resolution that the town should consider net zero energy practices in the development of future things, mainly kind of thinking about the new possible school building project and other municipal buildings. And I think we should support that and focus on that. I have a lot of ideas about things that we could do with energy efficiency, but it's I think we also need the section of the comprehensive plan is still being finalized, and we should talk to these groups like WEAC and select board and come back with a clear checklist of things that you want to accomplish, because I could list a whole laundry list of things here that we're not going to be successful if we just say, because I watched the presentation there, and I mean, actually a lot of it's about incentives and restrictions on development. So it's things that we'd like to do in the bylaws that would affect, as projects come before us, how can we encourage them to be more energy efficient and carbon neutral and all that. But I don't think that we're going to win if we don't get a lot more specifics on it. And the way to do that, I think, is through working with these other groups and then coming back at the next town meeting with a proposal of things that have been vetted by a lot of people.
Now, the article that's being worked on with WEAC and the select board, when I heard it, it seemed like it wasn't specific enough. It seemed like it was more, think about using this. How do you see the language in there now? Do you feel like it's going to have an impact? The reason why I say that is because I'd like to at least hold this as a placeholder. So if that article loses steam, we have something that we can try to bring.
So what I would think is that article provides a focus for discussion. And yes, I think it's been, I believe that on your advice, Pat, they removed some of the sort of the why issues and really said, like, let's just focus on the.
That's a fair assessment.
So in other words, not trying to carry too many ideas forward, but it puts the issue of net zero building construction out there for discussion as in a way that, basically, if you can't get approval for that, then we have a problem. But so I think if we try to have something also going on, which isn't terribly well defined here, it confuses things.
No, I hear you.
So we should devote the energy at the FinCom meetings and all to trying to support what WEAC is doing.
Yeah. Deb?
Is the WEAC one for all building or just for municipal?
Municipal, in school.
Okay.
Chris?
I agree with everything Dave just said.
And Bill?
The only thing is I find that with the selectmen, you said it's non-binding. And I think the select board's had multiple years of places to enforce, and so hasn't the planning board, energy efficiency. And I look at University Station, and you never, ever forced any solar panels or anything else down there. I think we should.
Those aren't municipal or school buildings, Mr. DeLay.
I realize what we're talking about here. I'm just saying that here we can put some teeth into it, and I think with municipal buildings, we're not asking for all buildings, but I think here we have to, it's a start. It should have been started 10 years ago, and I think the select board as it is now, the same people are there that were there 3, 4, 10, 15 years ago.
That's not true. I'm living proof of that, Mr. DeLay.
Isn't there a board member that's been there 15 years?
Probably.
I'm just saying that, so we have.
But I'm off. I've retired.
But you yourself have been there. But we made no choice of trying to be energy efficient, and I think this is our opportunity.
Well, we have taken steps. We became a green community. And what is the old Confucius saying? A trip of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So when I get out of here tonight, I'm not going to stay for your whole meeting. I've got to go to the selectmen meeting and try and finish warrant articles with them. We're very close on wording on this. I think WEAC and the Board of Selectmen agree. Have they left themselves some wiggle room in case the energy efficiency, the Islington Fire Station, we looked at solar panels on that, and the payback was too long. FinCom vetted it. Actually, the Board of Selectmen vetted it and decided not to put the solar panels on, but designed it in such a way solar panels can go on at some point in time when it'll be cost effective to do that. So I think this is a good first step. I agree with Mr. Atkins that after the first step, it probably needs some additional work to try and facilitate more energy efficiency in town buildings. And I agree with also your statement, if you have dueling warrant articles, it can become confusing to voters.
Yeah, so I don't have any intention of supporting a dual article. For me, this is, I came up with this article so that we could move forward with something, and then,
Great minds work alike.
so I think we're all set for this one. So moving forward, so Article 7, so new affordability requirements.
So you want to keep this article?
Yeah, I want to at least keep it as a placeholder for energy efficiency.
Do you have anything more specific to add to it? The legal ads do have to go to the newspaper next week, so if you're proposing something specific, we should include that in the legal notice. This is, I mean, right now, the way this is just kind of general reference, but doesn't say what.
See, I feel like it's,
Yeah.
let's not do a halfway effort here, because I would feel like then, oh, now we really need to come up with something.
No, I know.
Because people, if it goes out there, is the planning board is going to make amendments related to energy efficiency, and then comes up with like, not really anything substantive. I think it's
I think an approach that we may take is, let's see what WEAC does, let's see what the town responds, FinCom responds, the select board responds. If it doesn't work at this Springtown meeting, let's regroup our efforts, maybe again in the fall with WEAC or without, and maybe we come up with something and we can kind of learn from what didn't go right. If it goes right, then it's passed and great, but if it doesn't, then we can learn from it. I think what I'm hearing from Abby is we're kind of past the point of a placeholder. We need some actual meat on this thing.
Right, your article language doesn't have to be finalized, but when it goes to the newspaper, it needs to reference what you're proposing and all the sections of the zoning bylaw that you're proposing to change. So right now, it just kind of says energy efficiencies and in the site plan review section.
What do you need to know by, though? What's the date that it has to be in the newspaper by?
Next week I send it on Thursday morning.
Thursday morning?
Yeah, and I think by then so the select board and WEAC will be continuing working on their language.
As soon as I get out of here, I've got to go to the select board meeting to finalize language on at least 2 warrant articles.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with dropping this one, and be very disappointed if that article doesn't move forward to town meeting.
You can also wait till after FinCom when you present, because it doesn't have to be until Thursday.
Do we have to decide as a
Who?
We
full
won't have
board?
time to do
Yeah.
the offer
Yeah,
what we
exactly.
present as a board from Tuesday to Thursday.
Yeah, I'm okay with dropping this one and fully supporting what the select board and WEAC is doing.
I would agree with that.
Dave, is that?
Yeah, that's what I'd recommend. I also think that the environment, not the physical environment, but the things are changing rapidly, and so what I believe we're going to discover is that it's not a burden to have this requirement, but that actually the incentives are out there now that it's not like you have to spend a lot of extra money to be green. It's the logical and economic thing to do is what from that discussion. I think we're going to find out that maybe our efforts are better focused on incentives and things, or maybe it'll be interesting to see where the objections are so that we can then respond to those. And kind of like I said, if we can't pass a non-binding resolution that encourages net zero energy in new municipal buildings, then that will tell us better inform what we need to do next.
That's a good point.
Mr. Chairman, as a matter of procedure, I think you need a motion to withdraw the warrant article.
So Dave, do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to withdraw this warrant Article 6.
Second it?
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed
Opposed.
and abstained? So it's 4 to 1, so it is withdrawn.
So we didn't vote on any of the others, so is it just default that they go through, or we had a majority consensus? Or?
I was keeping track. It appeared that we had at least 3 in support of moving forward for the others. In the past, we haven't voted. I mean, we can certainly go back and vote.
On the medical use, though, we haven't determined if we are in agreement with the definitions and whatnot, so that can be all vetted.
Yeah, if you needed that tonight, we
It's,
can't vote on that tonight.
no.
Yeah, what is that language? Because when I was looking at the medical uses, it may be modifying definitions in the current bylaws. So what is needed for the paper for that?
You have enough to write in the paper, and what goes in the paper is kind of general citing. It references the definitions, a new overlay district, and changes to the table of uses.
What if the modification is definitions but not a map, no zoning map? So there are different ways of dealing with that. So could those changes be made, or is it zoning map plus definitions? Or
Both. Oh, and the zoning map too. Yes, we would add the zoning map in there. So it would cover everything.
And what
You're
if
not
the,
being specific about what the definitions are in the paper.
Not in the newspaper, but what we send to the town clerk afterwards, we say, visit the planning office and town clerk for the proposed article. So we do have as much as we have available, the whole draft is in there. But the one that goes in the newspaper tries to summarize and outline to capture everything that you're proposing. It allows for flexibility, so you can change it during your public hearings, but the scope of the article needs to remain the same.
So when this came up before, I remember that someone said, well, why can't we
Right.
change the zoning map? We couldn't because it hadn't been posted in
Right.
the article. Like what had been described and posted publicly was very limited, whereas this is now, has a lot more detail to it. It does include the zoning map and the table of uses and all, so it feels like there should be enough that we can then debate about how to change the details, or it still might not pass. But
Right.
this gets us able to have that discussion that we couldn't have had before because we could only work within the existing zoning maps and definitions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deb, do you have any other questions for that? Okay. So the next item is the Article 7, new affordability requirements. So to establish a new affordable housing requirement for the development of new residential subdivisions, or when a certain threshold of new single-family houses in a development is proposed to stay above the state-required statutory requirement. To see if the town will vote to add a residential affordability requirement is outlined below, unless otherwise provided for residential developments. So below you have, so the example is for greater than 7 dwellings, then the development would require an additional unit. So Deb, do you want to start with you on this one?
Yes, so this was just, what we're finding was there was one area that hadn't really been targeted in terms of affordability, and that was the subdivisions. And when you get sprinkled subdivisions throughout the town, they all add up, and then we have to account for the affordable housing in finding one affordable house for every 10 units that are put in a subdivision. So the purpose of that was to just keep adding as much affordable housing as we can.
And are you in support of this? And Dave?
So with this is the idea that with this, it would apply to, for example, the Westwood Estates subdivision that we
Something like, well, obviously that couldn't be retroactive, but yes,
Right,
similar
but
to
just
that.
looking
So,
for examples of
yes, yes. So, this was put in, written, well before today, and there needs to be tweaked a little bit, but it would specifically target subdivisions.
And what is there a problem with the subdivision control law? And I mean, why haven't we done this before?
The reason subdivisions don't have an affordability component is because, well, subdivisions are not regulated by zoning. It's a separate planning board subdivision of land regulations. And when they're by right uses, there is no legal way to impose an affordability component. So we have other uses that are allowed by special permit whenever there's a residential use allowed in town. In some cases, like the open space residential, we do allow single family, but by special permit, because we allow more than one on a lot or kind of clustering the homes, we do impose the affordability requirement. But there's no legal mechanism to require a single family use to be affordable. So that's just why it's not in our zoning right now. And subdivisions are separate. They're not under, if it's single family, it just falls under the zoning requirements, dimensional requirements for single family homes.
I understand this is well intended to help us stay above our 10%. I have a concern, and I've done some case research on it, that when you force a developer for that eighth home to be affordable, it may constitute a taking. Okay, and I looked not at the Penn Central station, which actually wasn't on, there's actually two U.S. Supreme Court, but I had to read through both of them. But the Penn Central station was actually a case where Penn Central tried to renovate Penn Central Station, or Grand Central Station in New York, and put an office building over the top of it. It was prevented because it was deemed a historic building, so it wasn't a zoning issue. The leading zoning case is Lingell, which articulates 4 ways that a taking can take place. So I'm concerned that if this were to pass, that the AG may not allow it, A, but B, if it were allowed and we forced a developer to either build an 8th affordable house or buy an 8th affordable house somewhere, it would constitute a taking, because you're depriving that developer the value use of the property that they own. So I have grave concerns about this from a legal perspective.
Apply to even any of the other developments as well?
No, because you're giving things up to get it. You're allowing them to cluster. You're requiring open space. There's a trade-off. You're bypassing your zoning ordinances to allow them. So you kind of get a free pass to do that.
So there is some towns that have required that subdivisions over a certain number, for example, 6, require a special permit that would include an affordability component.
That's fine if you want to do something like that. That's not what you're doing here.
Correct. So
You're-
this is the whole process that was vetting it and getting the language down. As I said to you before, I mean, it's been kind of silent in terms of where we go with the language here. So the research that I've done is if we make it a requirement for all subdivisions over a certain number to require a special permit, and the research has shown that developers are okay with that, from what I've seen so far. And
Do you have some towns for me?
not if I can give them to you later.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it is in their bylaws, and it
I
obviously.
don't want to go through a litany of
I know.
cases
So did
again,
I, but I had to. So, I mean, I think
as did I.
if we can reword it that way, then that would be more feasible.
So let me get this straight. You want to now change this to make subdivisions over, what's the number?
I would say over, well, what do we have here? So maybe
At 7, you require an additional house.
So the other option too, we wanted to sort of finagle with this was, it doesn't have to be a home, it could be a payment in lieu of. And that's what we, is in the affordability, is not in the affordability requirements right now. So there's still a lot of language that we need to work through with that. But I think that if we could do a special permit for subdivisions over even say 9, and then that will trigger, so if you put in 10, you have to provide something, an affordability component. But that's, something that the board could decide on, which number they feel is most appropriate.
Pat, is there a trigger that you're aware of to require a special permit? I mean, we know we use it, as you indicated, for OSRD or FMUOD situations.
Not that I'm aware of today, but I haven't had a chance to research that particular question.
I wonder what's special about it. The permit that you're building a large, I mean, frankly, we're probably running out of land anyway at some point. to
We are.
Right, subdivision. They're all gonna require a special permit, because they're gonna want the cluster opportunity to build more homes. So I'm just wondering legally, as Abby indicated, do we have a mechanism to even enact a special permit just because we said so?
What if,
I'm just wondering if there is. There may be, I don't know.
what if you had a small density bonus? Like, so you gotta provide something. You can't just say, okay, subdivision, we're gonna require you to do this. All right, what if you said subdivision that could be a maximum of 8 houses, we could let it be 10 houses if one of them is, the extra ones is affordable?
You can do something like that, I suspect, off the top of my head, but that's not,
That's not what this is addressing.
well, that's not how I've tried to shoehorn this in. This is, and the other piece that I've been straightforward with you about is, I don't know how you enforce the linkage component that you put in this. There's no requirement for everybody to report all the people who are involved.
Taken out, it's only strictly for subdivisions.
Okay, so that's out.
That's out.
Okay, that's news to me as well.
You're not getting my emails.
Perhaps I'm not. I did get the Penn Central one, though. So, it's up to you.
I'm happy with moving forward with that type of a scenario.
I think Abby will need definite, scope, though.
Sure.
We need to provide her with something that she can post.
So, so is there a way to modify this current language that we have here on the screen that includes that?
So the biggest barrier I see right now is that everyone feels that the buy rate, so going back to the OSRD though, there is, single-family homes are buy right in that. So do you require an affordability component for them?
I can check, but the OSRD already, that's by right, they do have like a small density bonus. They have the yield calculation that allows you to go denser. It may only be for the special permits that we have.
So that's where we could trigger it there with the special permit, make it over, so the towns that I was looking at had 6 as their trigger, but I think that a higher number might be more suitable. As you say, we're running out of land anyways.
What's wrong with 6?
We could do 6. I mean,
But is that
doesn't
6 is
trigger
0? It
anything.
doesn't
It
trigger
doesn't.
anything, yeah, so I would just go high.
No, but it does trigger them to get a special permit, and then if they build more than 6 at that point, maybe.
So what is the public posting need to have for next week? If we're moving in this direction potentially?
It needs to include all the sections of the zoning bylaw that you're changing and summarize what you're doing. I did just check also for the OSRD. We do have the affordability requirement for any OSRD special permit. So it's only the special permit starting at the 8 dwellings.
Would it make sense to think of it as, instead of an affordability requirement, which you're saying can't be applied to a by right development, it sounds like what we really want to do is create another type of special permit process.
correct.
That's maybe for development of, moderately priced homes. And how does the subdivision, what is it based on, the underlying, like 1 acre lots or something like that, or?
Yes, it's based on the underlying zoning.
So you could say that there'd be a special permit process for half acre lots. Let's say that if you go under the special permit process, then you can do 1/4 acre, half acre, something like that, which is actually like what much of the existing development is. But if you went under that special permit process, you could have a smaller lot size, which would allow them to have it's a density bonus, and then you'd be required to have an affordable component to it. And so that might be, instead of an affordability requirement, maybe this is proposing a new special permit, like the OSRD, but like the OSRD is 50% open space. This would be for an affordable, well, moderately priced homes, or entry-level home district or something.
You're presuming in that scenario that the developer wants to
Right.
build higher density. What if that developer just wants to build by right? If it's a 1 acre plot, every house gets an acre, just like Westwood Estates.
I think that's
They had the
kind of
opportunity for OSRD, and they
I think
chose
there might
not
be
to.
something in between those, like to say, and that's part of the thing, we want to encourage development of not McMansions on giant lots, but something, and maybe there's not enough for open space.
I get that. You're encouraging it. I'm all for that. But at the end of the day, they still can build by right. And I guess the underlying question is, do we have the legal mechanism to require this on a by right subdivision? Because an applicant can file under any zoning that exists on that plot of land. And if they choose to go with the underlying zoning, again, if they choose the Westwood Estate option, do we have the power to say, well, all right, you made 10, you need to make 1 affordable? That's my question here. I'm all for coming up with different solutions. I think that's great.
that's
But
what I'm
I'm
trying to-
wondering about this as it is. And if we're moving it out of that and we don't address by right, then fine. But that's my underlying concern is, what do we do with the by right subdivisions? Can we do anything with that? But if we want to come up with a new special permit, I'm great to look into
It would
that.
have to be a new subdivision special permit requirement
And we
and
just say hands off the by right?
for the subdivisions.
Right.
And the reality is, as you said, there's not much land left,
No, there isn't.
so.
But we also run into the problem of, say, Fox Meadow, beautiful, big homes, still some open land. So I believe there's still some vacant lots in there. An affordable house in that subdivision would not blend in. So it would be very difficult to put that, and I think that's part of what Pat was alluding to. That's like a taking. You're taking the value away from that developer who bought that land. So I'm leaning towards the legal concern for the by right subdivision. I'm on favor of addressing ways we can encourage other forms of development, but for this particular, the way it's written, I have concerns given what Pat has indicated to us.
And Bill?
Well, when you say that the affordable house will stick out, there's a subdivision in Weston, I forget the name of it, but they put affordable houses in with some very nice houses, and you can't tell that these are affordable houses there. They're smaller, but just the way that they built them, they look great, they fit great. So
It's all
you just-
subjective.
I'm just saying, it can be done, so.
I know. Stevens Farm, Fox
So,
Meadow, difficult places to blend in.
So what do you think about what's being proposed here?
I think Debbie's on the right track here with.
Yeah, I'd like to, but I don't know if we resolved the recommendation that you had. Yours was a little bit broader. So the example that you found had to be a requirement of special permit?
Special, all subdivisions over, theirs was over 6, but we could up that if you wanted, you know, to, special permit would be required for subdivisions over, it has to be a trigger number of, I mean, like I said, even if you did 9, that 10th one would be, and it doesn't have to be an affordable house on the premises. It could be a payment in lieu, it could be, you know, helping to, you know, fixing up houses that need to be fixed up under the, you know, for the housing department.
Dave, what do you think about that Deb just shared?
So I'm thinking that there's something, there's something to pursue here. I was thinking that the requirement on the underlying zoning was a problem, and that is a legal problem that would block this from being able to go somewhere. And so that's why I was suggesting maybe if we can make the idea of a special permit. We have to give something, though. It can't just, it wouldn't be, you can't have like a special permit is required for a subdivision, because it's not.
But we have the OSRD available
Again,
for
for
every
open
development.
space, and if we wanted to prioritize the development of smaller, denser dwellings, then that could be a different thing than
Right,
the
we could
OSRD.
tweak the OSRD to further encourage. I don't know if we need to come up with a new subdivision. I don't even know what, I mean, I have to think about it a while longer. You have to do some things to enact a special permit, and just building 8 units using the underlying zoning, I don't think triggers legally a special permit requirement for the town. I think it's kind of telling the developer, we haven't been good about staying above 10%, you're gonna help us along the way.
See, when
No
I'm-
one's had to do it before, but now we're starting with you.
What I'm thinking is that, like, let's say that you can build $10 million, or well, nowadays you should probably say $1.5 million to $2 million homes, or maybe they could build 20 $750,000 homes. And I'm sorry, the math might not work out there, but you know, what I'm saying is
Smaller homes, smaller lots.
there might be something for these moderate homes to encourage that over the option of, well, we can't get a special permit for this, we can't get it for that. We'll go to the underlying thing and we'll build a cul-de-sac with, 10 giant houses on it. And this, I think there's something here where we could we could try promoting something that would encourage these,
Starter home.
these entry level.
So what would so for the newspaper, what would, we didn't get the language what would it say? Because that sounds interesting to me that I would support. I just don't know what the language would be for the paper.
On the spot.
Maybe
You
it's like
were on
more.
your way, Dave.
A new affordable housing,
How would that differ from our current OSRD? With the
it
density
wouldn't be,
bonus?
they would not require the open space to qualify. So instead of like, and it gets to another issue, but instead of like saying, oh, well, everybody's got a backyard and there's 50% and then you can build this thing here, you'd
So
say, look,
you're taking away the calculation for
we'll
the
just,
OSRD.
yeah, and we'll say it would be a smaller development. It wouldn't, maybe my example of 10 to 20 wasn't a great example, but,
So we'd have to come up with the equation, the formula approach to, I mean, that's what the OSRD is doing.
yeah,
This
we
is a
don't
formula
necessarily
approach.
need that for the newspaper, but I think what we're saying is, if we put it out there as new affordability requirement for subdivisions, then I don't think we're going to be able to work with that.
Right.
Because you're gonna project it outright. So I think it's a new,
New subdivision, special permit.
Or, I mean, you did also receive a memo from our housing agent, Sarah Bouchard, in your packet, and she explained a little bit how there are special kind of affordable housing overlay districts or certain overlay districts and special permits that could be investigated that are sometimes used. So it's a whole new special permit process that would be in the zoning bylaw or an overlay district that matches a new section in the zoning bylaw and an overlay on the map.
Yeah, that's for tonight.
well, it could be bylaw changes to promote the development of smaller scale and affordable housing. It's just looking for a way to describe.
I hear what you're saying. I think it's interesting. I can't do the math in my head. If $750,000 homes is better than 10 $1.5 million homes. I don't know if it works from a developer's point of view. This is very complicated stuff, and it's far afield from your well-intentioned trying to keep us above 10%. And I don't know, well, I'm concerned about getting this done in a timely fashion for this town meeting and for the FinCom to be able to review it. Doesn't mean you give up on it, just means it may not make the bell for this one. It may make a bell for a fall town meeting or next spring. So one of the things that scares me most is unintended consequences. When you do stuff in zoning articles, general bylaws, quickly, there are unintended consequences, and that's something you always want to avoid.
So, but for this one, because I like the idea, I just don't know if it would, the by right issue. Does anything come to mind for you, Deb, that for this particular article?
I mean, would it behoove us to get, an opinion from a land specialist, legal counsel land specialist, or to see if we could do something like this by right?
I mean, usually we do, when we're developing zoning, we'll work on it. I think the last time we did the open space residential development, when we deleted and removed the old senior residential, we did have a subcommittee of 2 planning board members, and then we worked on with a couple local realtors and the housing agent at the time. So we had worked in a small working
You're
group.
just speaking of legal counsel
Yes,
who
for an
specializes in this, who can look at this language.
Can we or can't we?
We can always go outside. I mean, I have some very good resources available to me. The problem is we've got to nail down exactly what you want. You've gone pretty far afield from this tonight, but all good ideas. It's just a question of getting it done in a timely fashion. And I'm not sure that there is a race to get this to this town meeting, but I think it's better off doing it at a later town meeting and doing it right. So I would encourage you to put together a subcommittee. I'll be happy to serve on the subcommittee to look at this more comprehensively moving forward.
So what do you think, Deb? Well, I mean, you have done most of the research on this. I've supported this type of effort. I think it's a great idea. What I'm concerned about is the timing of the posting. So if there's any way that we can breathe some life into this, to me there's still time. We have FinCom, we have our discussions there to talk about it there. It's more of the required specificity of language within the paper.
Yeah, definitely not like this, so.
I mean, I think, Dave, you're going down the right road. I just don't know about the calculations and whether or not it's.
I think I told you this when you first sent me your first draft. In many ways, I think what you're talking about is so far ahead of what the state allows. That's one of the reasons we can't do it, is because it's a foreign idea, and the state never relinquishes its grip on towns. Anything we do needs to be kind of blessed either by the legislature or the AG. So I understand that you might be disappointed that we're not getting to the post right now, but I'd rather not get to the post right now and get to the post with something that's more that's not going to come back to bother us.
I'm not disappointed. It's a way to help keep us, and, if we get to, 2020, and as long as we're above our SHI, then, I mean, it's something to work with then. But if we're not above it, then I don't want to look back and say we missed an opportunity.
Understood.
Dave, do you have any other ideas before we move on? I think you had a great idea.
I did
Just-
too.
So,
Where were you
yeah,
2
I'm-
weeks ago?
No, I think it's a lot like the energy efficiency stuff, you know, it's like we've got these, it's complicated, so the question is whether you want to push, whether we should push forward, because sometimes pushing forward is the only way you get a good discussion, or, you know, or not, so I guess,
You came up with a great idea because I was reading in Forbes that starter homes, developers are starting starter homes in these developments. So it's actually something to think about.
Okay. Is there, Sarah, is there anything that we can do for this type of an article that might because I think the intention is good here. Is there anything that you can recommend that might help us?
My comment is really consistent here. I love this conversation. I love where it's going. And just as a reminder, this entire conversation is completely consistent with the housing production plan that you recently adopted. There's an action item in there talking about expanding affordability requirements in the ways that production plan identified. Starter homes, more moderately priced, modestly sized housing. There's so many different ways to craft an inclusionary zoning bylaw, whether it's creating new special permit opportunities or overlay districts. There are a lot of options that might be
Yeah, but
fruitful for Westwood,
beyond what we
but
discussed before, like,
I'm
so,
concerned that what we have here, or what you have the ability to put together here to keep this moving along for town meeting, I just don't think you've had the benefit of enough time to really talk through these ideas.
but do you have any, but is there anything that you come up with that might help here, if there was more time for this type of, like, we have subdivisions, so do you have anything or no?
I think we would benefit from doing a more comprehensive study with a subcommittee and all of the resources available to us to come to the best possible bylaw.
All right, thank you.
I'm just afraid that if we rush, to Pat's concern, we're not going to get it done in a timely fashion, but it's also really important to get it right. And that's my primary concern here.
That's fine. All right, thank you. Anything else from Bill?
No, just to reiterate, I'm concerned about, you just can't keep bringing the same thing in different clothes to FinCom, to the Select Board, and to the town. You get voter fatigue, and they're tired, like, no, we told you once already. No. They don't even listen to your next proposal. They just hear, all right, we're talking about affordable again. We voted this down last time, no. So, to reiterate what Sarah said, if we work on it, we get it right, it stands a much better chance of helping our town with affordability.
I just don't think we have the language for,
That's fair.
yeah. Is there anything
But we
you can
can
come up
work
with? Okay. Do you have anything else?
No, we can still work on the language, though.
But are we pulling?
But I think for the paper, they need something. What is the minimum requirement for the newspaper? Because I would like to continue this conversation on this.
I also think,
Whatever you go forward with the end has to match really the scope of what went in the article. So you have to think about what your end result is and
We have to
then,
guess where our conversation's going to lead
yeah.
at this point.
well, the FinCom presentation is what, 8 days?
Tuesday night.
Tuesday is the sponsor, and then early March is the
Happy to
public hearing.
brainstorm ideas, but I have the benefit of not having to answer the FinCom questions in a week on what the details are of this.
No. Okay.
Yeah, I just don't think we're ready on this particular issue. I think it's great to explore it, and I'm all for it, but I just don't see
Yeah.
springtime happening with this.
Yeah, I think it might have to get pulled.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, would you take a motion and vote that?
Yeah, so I make a motion to withdraw Article 7, the new affordability requirement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstained?
Abstain.
So we have three positive, one opposed, one abstention. So the next article, Article 8. So this is new residential construction temporary moratorium. So this is to impose a temporary moratorium on the construction of new residences and residential zoning changes until the results of the 2020 census are released. To see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws of the town of Westwood to include a temporary moratorium for a period of 18 months beginning May 4th, 2020, after town meeting approval on residential development until the release and study, review of study data on the 2020 census and impact on development upon the town as a whole, which will allow the study data to better guide the town's housing initiative and ideas to ensure ongoing housing compliance and to further direct, refine objectives and goals in recently developed housing production plan and assist in updating of Westwood's comprehensive plan. So why don't we just start with board discussion? Bill, did you want to lead off with this one?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't know if we have to do it. It'll be temporary. We're waiting for the census to come out. Even if we did it for a 6 month, it could be 18, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
And then Chris, do you have?
Yeah, I had a question. Sarah, you might be able to answer this. Do you know on what date we're counted for homes, like for the census this year?
Yeah, so Census Day is in April. I believe it's April 1st, but it's in April. That's the day where everything gets counted. So functionally, I'm not sure that this will have too much of an impact. April's going to come up real fast, before town meeting even. But that's the day. And for clarification too, so that sets the denominator, the total housing units in town. And that won't change for the next 10 years. The numerator, we can add units at any time. If we had a new affordable housing unit tomorrow, I could request an update to the numerator, and we have been doing that all along. So that can always change. It's just that denominator is set by that census, and the count is taken in April, although we won't get those figures probably till later in the year.
Is that the count of built, permitted, kind of what's the?
It's supposed to be occupied housing units,
Yeah, occupancy permit.
occupancy permits typically,
For
I
the,
believe.
for the denominator, but not for the numerator?
Not for the numerator. They don't have to be occupied yet for the numerator for the most part.
So the houses, like the group home that we just approved on Clapboard Tree.
So group homes are the exception. So group homes do have to be occupied to be
Okay.
placed on the SHI. That's really the only instance where that's the case. You'll see with, for example, Westwood Place. We were able to add those on once the building permits were pulled and once they had the signed regulatory agreement approved by the state. They didn't have to be occupied yet. I forwarded them the occupancy information afterwards, but they were placed on the SHI before they were occupied.
So if I understand the way this is laid out, April comes, we have our denominator, or the state has it, we won't find out for a while. On May 4th, we enact an 18-month moratorium. If we're one unit below, for 18 months, we can't build to solve our problem.
And
All right.
that's one way that we could add to the numerator is by new construction, but yes, we'd be limited in that capacity.
And we'd have to then go to town meeting the next fall to remove that, right? Because this would be a bylaw. So we'd have to go back 6 months to try to remove it, to solve our problem and to help get us over the 10%. But it won't even matter, though. For 10 years, we're on the hook, or no?
The number stays the same in the denominator, that total.
And
It's
a
only
40B
updated.
development would not, this moratorium wouldn't apply to it.
It would not.
So even though we can't build to solve our problem, they can come in
Correct.
and build something without our control.
And bypass density to do it.
Right.
If there's a moratorium, though, I don't believe that's true, because I did speak to a couple of people, and they said that if there's a moratorium, there's a moratorium, because it's temporary.
Chapter 40B allows a developer to pursue a comprehensive permit and bypass our local zoning bylaws. The comprehensive permit offers a lot more flexibility, so it waives things like setbacks, any other bylaw requirements that are restrictive. It allows the flexibility to offer those waivers.
But to be clear, this isn't to prevent a 40B. It's, the stars are perfectly aligned here in terms of the comprehensive plan. And what better way to factor in all of this to the facets of the comprehensive plan and help us to better guide the town, to give us accurate numbers, to tell us, if we, I know I've read the HPP, I've read the, some other sites where our population results are different, and, can our well support, more growth? What do we have to do? What better planning can we do to keep this town safe and make sure we have our school systems are functioning well, police, fire? There's so many things that go into the comprehensive planning. And if we don't know where we are right now, and we couldn't be in perfect timing. We don't have to do 18 months. We could do 6 months because the results should be in before the end of the year. So it's not like it has to be 18 months. There's some wiggle room there. But and we know that the AG's office will pass. They've done rate control of development. They have approved comprehensive plan. Go ahead.
Rate development is viewed as less strict than a moratorium. It allows some development, but not, a moratorium shuts it off. So the case that you talked about where they allowed, was it
I think it was 6 building permits over
per year
Yes.
for 6 years? That's viewed as less restrictive than a moratorium, I believe, by the Attorney General.
This is only temporary, though, and as I said, the wiggle room is there to decide whether it be 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, a year. That's nothing that's something that we can vet as we go through the process. But I think until we know, when I last spoke to the state, they said you have no more land. The only way you're going to be able to go is to go up. And do we know where we're at right now? That's the biggest question. We don't know. We've been told we don't know the housing unit numbers. The population numbers are predicted at, I don't know, different numbers. And to better guide the comprehensive plan, I think that we're in a good place with this.
So I guess my first question for you is, can you articulate the reason for the moratorium?
So that we cannot get an answer as to what the housing units are, what the population is. We don't know, we've asked about, building permits, and if we don't know any of these numbers, how can we truly plan for our town?
Well, I think we've taken 2 steps. We've got a comprehensive housing plan that's been endorsed by you and the Board of Selectmen.
It has nothing to do with the 40B. It has to do with the infrastructure. It has to do with the housing. It has to do, where do we put the housing? How does that get spread out? Do we need more housing? There's so much important information that can be gained from
So I guess my question for you is, what additional planning behind the comprehensive plan that's kind of rounding third and heading for home, and the comprehensive housing plan, do you foresee that you need between now and the census data coming in?
So what if the census data comes in and we're at 17,000 and we're still building housing units? Do we know from the Dedham-Westwood Water District what can our wells sustain? Sure, we can hook up to the the MWRA?
We are already hooked up to the MWRA.
But, we have to really think about our well system. We already have bans going on in the summer, water bans. How much?
Those are enforced by usually the MWRA when we have to tap in, because our wells go low when it's dry.
So the big question is, how much can we support? And that's something that really needs to be looked into in terms of where we are with numbers.
So you're suggesting that we need to engage Dedham Westwood Water District to do a water plan?
first of all, studies don't have to be done before moratorium is voted on. But after the fact, I think that, I mean, we've got the perfect, the census right, I mean, the comprehensive draft right now. And it's a great starting point. But let's make sure that it aligns, that plan is for 10 years to give us the direction of the town. And I can't state more that this is the perfect situation.
Okay, so for my research, Sturgis and its prodigies, the constitutional test, which is easier to state than apply, is whether the bylaw that you're proposing is clearly arbitrary and unreasonable, having no substantial relation to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. That's the constitutional test. And there are presumptions in favor of the town should it get challenged. I won't dispute that. But I just have a hard time for myself understanding what, I don't think that we may be under our 10% is a good enough reason to stop all building in town.
Not about the 10% though. That's what you have to be clear about. This is a separate article. It's nothing to do with 40B. And I've written it to Sarah, I've written it to Abby, and I've written it to you. It has nothing to do with 40B.
Maybe I just can't separate it in my own mind. It's completely possible, but it feels like it does. And I'm concerned that I would encourage you to shorten it for a shorter period as you can.
And I'm willing to work with that time. I think it's something that we can vet. Board members should have
Yeah, I've spoken enough. I'll let the planning board speak.
Yeah, Davis, I need to continue to study this one. So I need to look into the data for that. But I'm willing to continue the discussion on it. I just need to study it further. Dave?
So, no, I'm not in favor of this. I think what it does, I was kind of hung up on the 40B stuff, but I realize now that, no, what this really does is it takes all the teeth out of the FMUODs. It basically blocks any economic development, anything that involves a residential component. I mean, that's the real gist of it, is it's because, so, I mean, it's another way to stop the overdevelopment of the town. And I don't support that. I think that we have a process here that we can review these applications, and I don't see I don't see people building lots of new houses. Yeah, there's tear downs going on and all, but I don't see this as effective, and it's definitely, it starts after, well, yeah, so I'm not in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, what struck me was what Pat said about the constitutionality of this. And he cited off a whole bunch of things, and I understand, Deb, you mentioned it's not about 40B, and I was erroneously going there myself, but it doesn't sound like us not having done our homework so far is enough to trigger the threshold that Pat addressed. And it seems like we have to find a way to do our homework, to figure out where we are without stopping the possibility of economic development and growth. Even if it is residential. I know a lot of people just want the town to stay as it is, but that's not going to happen. That's why this board is assembled, because things are going to be happening. So I don't see us triggering that threshold, so I would not be in favor of this.
Thank you. And Bill?
Yeah, I already said, but if it were, I could see it going to 6 months or something like that. And I don't see anything wrong with stepping back, taking a deep breath and see where we're headed with this, so I'd be in favor of it.
Okay, so I think we're all set with that one.
So you want to,
So, well, we didn't vote on the other ones, but it sounds like there's three. I'm in favor of continuing the conversation and researching and doing my investigation.
so put this in the newspaper? You've been voting on the ones
Yeah,
to
will you
withdraw.
explain what
Yeah, I was
happened
gonna
with notice on this particular issue?
Oh yeah, so one of the major concerns I had with this one is once that first ad goes into the newspaper, the town has to act as if it's adopted. So once this moratorium, residential moratorium, and no issuance of building permits is published in the newspaper, the building commissioner can't issue building permits. He has to wait through town meeting. So you're kind of in this limbo state from early February all the way till town meeting in May. So you should decide now if you're
So you're
gonna go
saying
forward
once
with
this
that.
goes in the paper, if this goes in the paper on Thursday,
Yep.
a moratorium is in place.
Until town meeting.
Until town meeting. If
If
it's
voted
voted
down,
down, then it goes
If it's
back.
voted on, it stays on for however long it's been deemed.
Yep. And then the effective date is town meeting.
So what's the purpose of the vetting process then that we have to go through in getting FinCom's advice? So if we went to FinCom and they said, listen, this is a good idea, but you need to do this, or this is a bad idea, you need to do this, then if we pulled it, then it's pulled. It's not going forward. Just like we took off something last year.
Right. I mean, if it's formally withdrawn, if it were to be withdrawn after,
I haven't read the case law yet.
but we have had in the past, you have had, I don't think last year, but I think maybe the year before, last couple of years, you get zoning freeze plans. So you get people submitting A&R or the subdivision plans trying to get in before the town meeting vote. Because if they go through that process, then they get zoning freeze. So it usually, once you have the public hearings in the newspaper, people will often start working on submitting applications to you
So
for a
Pat,
zoning
is the
freeze.
moratorium in place if this goes in the paper next Thursday?
That's my understanding.
Wouldn't that be for any bylaw then? Any article zoning change?
No,
Why?
I don't know the reason why. Yeah, I don't know the reason why. I just know from my research that that's what happens with moratoriums.
I mean, we could go to FinCon Tuesday night and they could beat the heck out of us and we walk away and say, you know what, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, so
Don't lose that strategy.
the issue I have with this is that the census gets taken place in April. And at that point, the denominator is being generated. Affordable units can be added over time throughout the 10-year period until the census comes again. I agree with you that I do have a concern about growth in town. I think lots of residents, you hear that. It's getting denser, and sometimes that's the way of the world, but I do hear people being concerned about it. I'm wondering if when the census data comes out, then we deal with population growth and things like that. But to put a 6-month moratorium, I've been thinking about this for a while. I don't see how that has the beneficial effect that I want it to have with that. Because my biggest concern is that mark. I mean, we as a town, we need to, similar to the previous article, we need to do our job to generate homes for people who have needs.
With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you, and I can tell you one of the things that at times wakes me up in the middle of the night is I have this bad recurring dream where we fall 1 unit short and we have a moratorium and we have the ability to add a unit somewhere as a town, but we can't. Okay? I can't think of a worse scenario to have at that point in time.
And I don't, to risk, even though that's your legal opinion and you're our town council, so I respect that. to enact a moratorium where it may be revoked through a planning board meeting or town meeting. I wouldn't want to be in that situation without that being vetted ahead of that going into effect. So that's another concern that I have. But my desired effect from this, I think, would be down the road when we find out what the data show, and then taking some action once we have the census data. But for me, a moratorium may not get us there.
You probably are in a stronger position if you have the denominator, and and I know it's not a 40B issue, but you probably are in a stronger position to enact some type of moratorium specifically tailored and articulate the planning you need to do around those issues. I think you're in a much stronger position to do that than you are right now. I think, listen, I've communicated with you. I think you worked very hard on these, and they're very well intended. I'm concerned about the unintended consequences.
So my decision tonight is based on the moratorium going into effect. Once this is posted, I do not want that to happen. So it sounds like we have 3 that are leaning towards no based on what I hear, but I think we need a motion to. Does anybody else have anything to add to this? Okay. Do you make a motion to withdraw?
I'll move that we withdraw this Article 8.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Opposed.
Abstained? So it's 3 yeses, 2 opposed. So it's withdrawn. So the next article is amendment to open space residential development bylaw. This was brought to the board from Steve Olenoff, and Steve Olenoff didn't provide information, so I make a motion. Wait, before I do that, did the board have any comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, he did say he couldn't make it, but that he would write the article and send it to us early next week, because I told
2024.
him
So what did he say?
it was about clarifying how to
What
calculate.
was his email to you?
Or he called and said he couldn't make it tonight, but he would write, because I had previously told him we need the zoning language to go to the newspaper next week, so he said he would write the language for this section. It's about how to calculate the open space and
He's
how you
gonna-
count
Any
it.
numbers or
No, I
anything?
don't-
If he's
no,
going to
not
do
yet.
that, then I think we have the language to move it forward in the paper. I'd be fine if sounds like he's willing to do some work.
Or
we
is
have-
that something we need to look at it before?
Yeah.
But it's,
It's
Yeah.
our article, not
Yeah.
his. I'll do it.
so I heard what he was saying. What the concept is how to calculate open space.
Right.
And he was looking at essentially backyards being included.
Right, and I guess I think he was hearing that 215 High Street and following that along. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't see the timing working out for us to
Yeah.
debate this or discuss what he has to say about
Yeah.
the calculation.
Yeah, it's too little, too late.
It's,
Yeah.
I'll make the
it's not how
motion.
you promote a bylaw change in our town.
Deb, do you have any comments?
No, I agree. We don't really have anything to, unless he sent it to you and then you sent it out to us individually before
He sent you nothing.
Thursday, and then we comment, but
Did he generate anything or nothing?
No, not yet.
nothing.
Bill, do you have any comments?
No, there's nothing here to.
Yeah, so I make a motion to withdraw this.
I'll second it.
A motion, a second, all's in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So it's withdrawn. Thank you very much, Pat. So that concludes, yeah, Where's my agenda? And next on the agenda is, are we required to have public comment for?
No.
All right, so next on the agenda, item 2, 141 Woodland Road and Star Gas Company. Is the applicant here to present?
Good evening, everybody. So we're here for the continued hearing of the EIDR and Air Material Movement application for Eversource. This is related to the project at Woodland Road. Before we start, I guess we can go ahead and introduce our team. I don't know if you want to do.
Hi, I'm Jen Batara with Eversource, the Environmental Licensing and Permitting Department.
I'm Eric Gordon with OEAPC. I'm the Director of Engineering.
I'm Steve Flanagan with Open, Project Manager for the design.
You should be.
And I'm Mike Dunk with Epsilon Associates, assisting with all the
Mike.
permitting and licensing for the
You should
project.
have a mic.
Oh, when you, and then I'd ask when you come up to present, you can, whenever you get to the mic, you can state your name.
Just to make it easier, a little more efficient. Just send it to one of them. I don't know.
Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a continued hearing of our EIDR and EMM application as it pertains to the project at Woodland Road. I don't know how many people were here at the last public hearing meeting. I can quickly go over the overview of the project. So really, Woodland Station, what we're looking to do is to rebuild our existing City Gate station. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide.
Sorry. Sorry. Okay.
F5, I'll get you there.
I think this is slide number 3.
Slide number 3, the next one? Oh, back.
Yes, ma'am.
1, 2, 3. This one? Where?
The one that has the map.
Oh, back to the overall map?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, so the Eversource, we have about 19 of these facilities all over Massachusetts. So Woodland Road Gate Station is one out of 19 that we have in our different franchise areas. If you go to the next slide, the reason we are rebuilding this particular station is because it's aging equipment. Facility was built probably in the 60s. So we want to replace the equipment we have there right now. Obviously, the town of Westwood is going to benefit, and we're going to benefit from having modern facilities with more modern controls. So that is really why we are looking to rebuild the existing station. Also, during the construction, we want to maintain uninterrupted service to our customers. So we are looking to, one, construct the new station before we remove the existing one. That way we can maintain service during construction. There's been a lot of back and forth between Eversource and the town of Westwood and the peer reviewers. One thing that we really want to make sure that we minimize is the impact that this project has in the neighborhood. We've really taken minimizing visibility from outside the station. We've taken that seriously. So during our design and during our design modifications, some of the things we try to do is we try to utilize the existing topography, and we're going to implement vegetation screening just to obscure view from the arborist and view from outside the station. Also, we are going to have a new screening fence installed just to, again, obscure view from the neighbors. Like I mentioned, we want to minimize the impact of this project in the neighborhood. In addition, on the south and east portions of this property, we're going to have some evergreen trees planted. Again, the whole purpose is to minimize the visual impact it's going to have on the neighborhood. And finally, I like to think the people of Westwood would appreciate us having a reduced on-site construction time. So with that in mind, we're going to try to have some prefabricated buildings assembled on site. That way we don't spend much time on site fabricating these. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned earlier, this project was subjected to an extensive review process. Thanks to Mr. Tom Houston and the planning board, we really received some insightful expert review comments, which we try to address. So on December 5th, we received, like I said, extensive comment from Mr. Houston here. He had a list of about 33 comments, which basically served as guide for us as we modified our plans. Really, all his comments centered on making sure the people of Westwood, their interests are protected. So we're going to get into the details of some of those comments. On December 10th, we had our first planning board review, which was continued, or which is continued today. December 17th, Eversource, we try to provide some responses to some of the expert comments that we received from Mr. Houston. On December 19th, there was a follow-up conference. Thanks to Abby for accommodating us. We all sat together and basically sought his expert opinion on how we can address some of his concerns. On 13th of January, we provided, by means of revised plans and some comments, our resolution to some of his concerns. And that brings us to January 17th, when Mr. Houston provided us his, I like to think of that as his final evaluation. So that brings us to today, which is what we're here to continue the hearing. Next slide, please. So on this slide, really, we've tried to capture the concerns that people of Westwood had at the last meeting. I recollect someone saying something about visual impact of the project. Mr. Houston also had concern with us maintaining a residential look for the neighborhood. This was particularly for the building. We want to make sure our building doesn't look out of place. Likewise, there was a concern with the increased traffic. High Street particularly came up. So we're going to address some of those. Enable had a concern with making sure we have focused lighting. So I don't mean to run down this list. I just wanted to mention some of the concerns that the people of Westwood had. And like I said, we addressed all these.
Can I make clarification? Did you address all of those concerns?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any, so there are none on the?
So there'll be,
She needs to.
so yeah, so just so you know, so the process is, so they provide their presentation, and then the board will ask our questions, for which we have, and then there will definitely be questions for the public. So that's the procedure. So you'll have plenty of time to ask questions.
Will this meeting be stopped and then continued later because of the time?
At this point, we're just moving forward. I don't know how long his presentation is. But yeah, you'll definitely have time for your...
I'll have to go to work tomorrow, so.
If you have to leave, just raise your hand, and I'll decide to allow if you have questions, stuff like that. Yep. You're welcome. You can proceed.
All right, thank you. So like I mentioned earlier, Mr. Houston had really insightful comments. We had 33 comments, which we addressed, and he went a step further to make sure the town can really enforce those suggestions. So some of them came back to us as possible conditions of approval. So I just wanted to allay everyone's concerns that we really work together with the expert to address the concerns. So the like I said, his comments really centered on the issues that were raised at the last public hearing. Again, points 3 and 4, like I mentioned, are just those concerns were resolved through site plan revisions. We provided some additional documentations, some additional calculations which he requested, and again, to ensure enforceability, which someone had issue with. Some of them were okay with those coming back as conditions for approval. So I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, please. So really, these are some of the issues we think will come back as conditions for approval. We, again, like I said, we have no issues with abiding by those requirements. Defining work hours, again, we are willing to comply with the town's recommendation on which hours we need to, we can work. The building, like I said, there's a requirement placed on us to make sure the building has a residential look to it. We address that concern as well. The other comments, we've walked through the peer reviewer to address also. So next slide, Abby, please. Yeah, I'll go to 11. Yeah, like I said, we're okay with having some of these as conditions of approval. If the town believes that we need to utilize their established truck route, we're okay with it. If you think it's best to have it as a condition of approval, Eversource is willing to comply with that requirement. If you go to number 2, please. We understand the importance of High Street to the people of Westwood, and we have no issues with walking between the hours of 9 and 4 p.m. to make our truck trips on weekdays, and 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Again, if you decide to make this as a condition of approval, Eversource has no concerns with this particular requirement. For COA 3, again, thank you to Mr. Houston. He strongly suggests that we do not bury any boulders, any stumps, or any excavated rock on site. So we have arrangements in place to make sure these are disposed of and not dumped on site. So again, we have no issue with complying with this requirement. 4, please. Through the peer review comments, there was a requirement for us to provide a revised landscape plan prepared by a licensed landscape architect. Again, Eversource provided what was required. So, like I mentioned, we've worked with the town, we've worked with the peer reviewer to make sure we are complying with all the requirements. Number 5, please. We are planning to make some improvements at this station. If you've been following this project, one of those is we have a retention basin that we've designed. The location of this retention basin is going to be exactly where we have the existing building. So again, Mr. Houston wants us to provide verification of the soil characteristics. So again, we have no issues with complying with this requirement. some of the revisions we've made to our plans. Mr. Dwight here can show those to us.
Thank you, Samuel. Yeah, my name is Dwight Dunk with Epsilon Associates. And one of the things I just wanted to point out is these 5 conditions of approval. These were taken from Mr. Houston's report of the other day. And we just wanted to note that the other items had all been identified as being resolved. And these were the items that were left to be included as conditions so that they get taken care of. Next slide, please. Yes, most of the way that the addressing the conditions or the items addressed by Mr. Houston as well as the public are addressed through the site plan. This is the site plan that was reviewed at the last meeting in December. It had been updated slightly from the original application. I just wanted to identify what that is. And this goes on to the next one. And I just have this one up here. It's the same as the slide. It's no different from the slide. It's just up here to make it a little bit easier. In addressing, the issues of construction impacts, traffic impacts, from trucking, et cetera, the items in the change in the site plan was, number one, reducing the amount of rock and soil cutting from 850 cubic yards down to 670 cubic yards, just over a 20% reduction. The building remains in the same place. There's just a little less separation between the building and the cut slope, but that reduces, obviously, the number of trucks that are needed to haul the material off-site in an effort to reduce the trucking impacts from the project. Number two, in terms of the impacts from the to the neighborhood on visual, we've added a screening fence, which is a vinyl, solid vinyl fence, so it provides a visual barrier from the public ways. And in discussions with Mr. Houston and from the others, we've added more vegetation as well as different levels of vegetation. So there's a layer of shrubs as well as 2 rows of trees to the south and to the north to provide enhanced visual buffering to limit the impacts from the public ways. So many of the other comments were relative to backup of analyses for stormwater, et cetera. So a lot of that was technical between the engineers at Odin and Mr. Houston. Next slide, please. What we wanted to do, which we did not have last month, was some more visual, not simulation, but visual renderings to try to identify and give a better understanding of what the site would look like. This is a bird's eye view of the site from the southwest. Next one, please. And then another bird's eye view from the northeast. These, you can see the rows of the plantings, the tree, the multiple rows of trees and vegetation, as well as the visual screening fence. This one also includes, it's kind of hard, more shadowing of the detention basin area. Next slide, please. What we also did was to try to show what it would look like was showing some profiles from different observation points, from 5 different observation points from the public ways, as well as from the residents to the north and the south. So this is just an image that shows what those view sheds or observation points are facing. Next slide. So location 1 is from Woodland Road facing north. And what this image is showing is the existing topography is in brown. So at Woodland Road, the site, gains in elevation. So you're basically retaining the hillock between the road and the building. With the proposed vegetation and existing vegetation, and then the screening fence, that blue line going up at an angle would be the view looking up. With the screening fence, the height of that screening fence would mean that you could not see the the proposed station from that vantage point. That's down here on Woodland Road. Next slide, please. This is a rendering, computer-generated rendering of what that view would look like. It's not a photographic simulation, so the ground cover showing grass is probably a little misrepresentative, but the idea is that the trees with the hill and without being able to see the building in the background. Next slide. Location number 2 is also on Woodland Road, again facing pretty much west, where the hill is being maintained. We have the same situation with the hill, the vegetation, and the screening fence, so that the view of the new station will be obscured and not visible from the road. And that is just, again, to show that with the trees, basically, we're just going to be seeing vegetation from the road, and that's at this location here, just south of the intersection with Gloucester. Next view. This location is at about the intersection of Gloucester and Woodland Road. It's facing towards the building, not straight down the driveway, but towards the building to see if the building would be seen from that vantage point. The access road will have a bit of a bend to it. Going straight is the gas pipeline easement. This one here, again, we still have that hill that's maintained. We don't have the screening fence in this location. There's a couple of chain link fences, and the visual is just over the top of the height of that building. That's this corner of the closest building here. That's shown in the cross section. And then this is the view looking down the proposed access road with the fencing, the new gate, and the trees. Next slide. This is facing north from 151 Woodland Road. We have in this site view, again, we have the vegetation, the screening fence. You can see the grading for the detention basin system between that property line and the building. And then the view shed is just missing the top of the building because of the screening fence. Next slide, please. And again, this is really just rendering, computer graphic rendering that is just going to be a visualization of the trees and shrubs. Next view, please. And this is facing south from 129 Woodland Road. This view is coming through here, and basically it's looking across where the gas pipeline is with their some of their above ground piping work, and the line of sight is shown through the top of the closest trees, filtered through some of the trees a little further back. And next slide, please. And again, basically the idea is we have that in the white of the, you can see some of the white of the screening fence that's in the background of this view. And lastly, this is the photo of the brick facade that could be applied to the station rectangular concrete buildings. So we've tried to focus on the topics that were raised at the last meeting of visual assessment from the public roads, the adjacent properties, the site, the changes in the site design that limit the rock removal, material removal that limits and reduces truck trips compared to the original site design, the adding of the screening, and the detention system, the detention basin, that was designed to meet the state performance standards. Additional information was provided to Mr. Houston relative to the soil classification that was used in the model to size the basin and determine the rates of runoff. So kind of all the details of that. That revised stormwater report was submitted to the board, stamped by a PE, with that design provided. It accounts for a reduced rate of runoff from the post-construction compared to the pre-construction. The outlet was also shifted to make sure that the stormwater is directed basically in a westerly, northwesterly direction. So it's still directed to remain on the site, then it'll go into the adjacent wetlands and, flow how water flows through the existing adjacent wetlands. Just trying to run through those topics that were, identified earlier in the PowerPoint. So stormwater, visual traffic, trucking, as we said, the truck routes is directed by the board. Eversource will accept those, as well as the uniform traffic officers for, transportation management. And in conclusion, this project has gone through, I think, significant review. We appreciate the effort provided by Mr. Houston, as well as Ms. McCabe with facilitating the meetings. During the holiday season, there's a lot of back and forth between everybody. As we mentioned, there are 33 items. Pretty much all of them have been resolved through that letter. Identified that the 5 additional ones can be addressed as conditions of approval. So we have no problems with accepting those. And then we respectfully request that the board could see their way fit to move forward and close this evening and vote to move the project forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else from? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Would you all like Tom Houston to? Yeah. So Tom, would you like to share?
Good evening. I'm Tom Houston, the peer reviewer for the project. And the second submission of plans and calculations represented a significant change and a significant improvement over the original design. I'll just hit a few of the high points because the presentation has been detailed so far. We had concerns about the soil and groundwater testing. The detailed response documented the nature of that soil and groundwater testing, and we are now satisfied that that testing is sufficient. The only outstanding item is you always want to test actually in the footprint of the basin. When you're drilling a boring, you can tell what's inside the boring casing. You can't tell what's happening 1 foot outside. So you always want to have tests right within the footprint of the basin. In this instance, the existing building occupies the area where the basin will be placed. So just as a check, we had recommended, and the applicant concurs, that during the construction phase, the soil conditions in the basin should be inspected by a representative of the town, just to ensure that the conditions in the basin are the same as those that were tested in nearby areas. The other significant improvements were the screening. A plan was submitted by a registered landscape architect, which I think is effective in screening the facility, particularly
from the adjacent residences. The other significant concern we had was with respect to the extent of rock excavation on the site and the ancillary impacts that relate to blasting. First, the revised plans measurably reduce the amount of rock excavation, principally by reducing the setback between the existing regulator building, which is this building on the right-hand side here, reducing the setback between the rear facade of that building and the rock face. Fundamentally, they're leaving more of the rock in place, which means less rock has to be removed and hauled off-site. They also provided information that it is somewhat unlikely that extensive blasting will be required on the site due to the fractured nature of rock that's there. They did include on the drawings additional controls with regard to how that rock is removed, with sort of blasting being the last choice if necessary. So all in all, I think we were quite pleased with the responsive nature of the revised submission, and I think the significant concerns that we raised have been addressed with the revised submission.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So now we can go to board comments. So Deb, do you have?
So if you go to blasting, that's directed to you, I'm assuming you'll go out to the houses and check the houses out before the blasting occurs? Any of if blasting is required? I don't know who can answer that.
I'll jump in, respond for the applicant. It's a standard protocol whenever blasting is done that any structures in the vicinity of the blasting work are inspected usually by a structural engineer. They photograph the interior. The damage that occurs can either be cracks in the foundation or cracks in the plaster walls. There's also a concern about private wells. And there is a private well somewhat in proximity to this site. So I think one perhaps mitigating measure is the fact that the gas facilities themselves, including the gas mains, the transmission mains, are obviously quite fragile, and Eversource has a lot of protocols in place because of the nature of the mains that are there. So to the degree that blasting is controlled to protect the gas facilities, it also helps to protect the adjacent residences. Blasting anywhere is done in a controlled manner. The charges are relatively small. They're done, and I'm sure they would in this instance, be done by experienced contractors. So is there a danger? Yes. Did they indicate in their response that they would be responsible and would include reasonable measures to mitigate that? In my judgment, they did. So.
Another question. Personally, I don't think the brick facade is a step up from what it originally looked like, but I'm going to defer that to public comment to see what they think. And also, in terms of the screening, we might want to put in a condition that if it's not satisfactory to the residents, that can be, you can work with them with the screening.
I just wanted to comment.
And just grab the microphone.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
yes. I don't think it's an actual brick facade. I think it's sort of a simulated brick facade. It's a treatment, I believe, to the surface of the concrete, but it's intended to look like brick.
So it could be something else. If I'm just curious.
Yeah, what
Looks like a fireplace or, all due respect, or a
Well,
prison.
with the existing building is a brick building.
Mhm.
So in terms of, the aesthetics of the site, where the existing building is a brick building, what was shown before was, basically, the concrete,
Correct.
smooth concrete or stucco type finish painted And so this is a different, you know, as Tom mentioned, it's a stamped concrete, painted to look like brick, simulated to look like brick. The idea was to have it be similar to what's there now. However, with the proposed screening with the fencing, solid screen fence, as well as maintaining the existing topography, it shouldn't be visible from, you know, the public roads and the adjacent homes. So it, you know, we're there so that it would look similar to what's there now. If there is a filtered view of it, you know, down the access path, you know, from some angles, it would, the idea is that it would look similar to what people are seeing now.
Dave?
So I have some questions about inside the structure, kind of what, can you describe, sort of what is the effect of the upgrade? Like, is it more equipment, kind of what changes happen to the inside? of the
Yeah,
structure?
I might defer to the engineers for more detail, but the purpose here is when the gas goes from the high pressure interstate transmission pipeline, it needs to be have a reduced pressure to go into the Eversource system. So these buildings reduce the pressure, which requires a lot of things that Steve can talk about. It also includes equipment for increased redundancy of the equipment, as well as telemetry units, so it can be operated remotely for increased safety. But I'll let Steve talk in more detail.
Good evening, Steve Flanagan with Odin. Yeah, so by and large, the same functionality will be there in the new buildings as is in the existing, but greater capacity. So first, the gas is filtered, then it's measured. So like the meter in the existing building is quite small. The state of the art now is ultrasonic measurement, which is just occupies a lot more physical space. There's a level of redundancy that'll be there that's not there currently. Again, the gas is, as Dwight said, the gas pressure is reduced from the high pressure of the transmission line to the distribution level. Odor is added to make it more readily detectable in case of a leak. The gas is, I don't know how technically you want me to get the gases.
Just kind of like, so it's going to be, so it sounds like there will be additional redundancy and kind of, this
Yes.
will allow for greater safety in terms of.
Right, so it's an increase in both the capacity of the station, its ability to feed gas, you know, more gas into your distribution system, and then also levels of redundancy in the heating system. The gas has to be heated before you cut the pressure, so it doesn't freeze up. So there's more redundancy in the heating system. It's mostly just, as Samuel mentioned, this is, you know, the station was made in the 60s, so it's bringing up to current equipment, which allows, you know, the current standards require more redundancy, more remote control, more monitoring, all good things. So
I guess, Dave, to add more to this, in my opinion, the greatest benefit you would have, or this project will provide is, like Dwight said, we're going to have remote control ability. That is huge, you know, our ability to respond more swiftly. So that is one of the benefits this project is going to provide. Right now, we have an old station that was built in, I think, 50s or 60s. You know, having something installed this year, obviously we're going to have modern controls, which I don't think is fair to compare it to what is applicable in the 50s or 60s. So this is really a huge upgrade, you know.
So I have to ask, any lessons learned from Lawrence and the Merrimack Valley, because as I understand the situation there, and I have great confidence in our local company here, but my understanding is the ultimate cause of that was an automation that by disconnecting, and then there were old circuits that or old systems sensors that were the gas was turned off, and they kept reporting, and that led to overpressurization of the local network. And so I just wanted to hear some. I'm sure you've studied that, and just make sure that what we're doing here is totally safe for the town of Westwood.
Yeah, sure. I think you're up to date on the Merrimack incident. So if they had a remote shut-off ability, in my mind, they could have more easily contained that incident. So this particular station that we're going to build is going to have some valves called ESD valves, emergency shutdown valves. What that valve is basically a valve with an actuator that gives you a remote shut-off ability. So someone in Southborough can press a button and shut off the valve and basically cut off supply coming into the distribution system. So this station is going to have that, like I said, that remote control ability. They have sense lines, I don't know, maybe on the street. Obviously, this facility is not on the street. Everything is within our station, so we know what we have inside our station. It's not like we have pipeline on the street and we don't know what the existing utilities are. This is our station. We know what the existing facilities are, so we're not going to have such issues here.
Is there any, like while you're doing the cutover, is there a risk of like release of gas or kind of, yeah, are you able to detect ongoing leaks at this facility and contamination of groundwater, things like that? What sort of safety measures are there for that?
In our buildings, we are going to have, obviously we're going to have gas detectors. Again, those have alarm controls. So if we have any gas leaks inside the building, someone in Southborough would know, they would detect the gas levels. It's going to trigger an alarm that is inside the building. Outside the building, we don't have any such provisions to detect leaks unless someone calls it in. But inside the building, yeah, we have means of monitoring any leaks or presence of gas inside the building.
And another thing was, I think a resident asked about, there used to be a way to walk through to the gas right of way, I think, and ultimately get to Hale Reservation. I just wondered if there was any chance of, since it's now completely enclosed, if there was any way to make that path usable again.
I guess I like to preface this by saying Eversource would like to be a good neighbor. We would like to support our neighbors, but after the 9/11 incident, it really became important that we secure our gas facilities. So that makes it a very hard request, for us to grant access to such an important facility. So speaking to our real estate group, I think they would like to keep the facility secure. I don't see them approving that request. Even if we wanted, even if the engineering group wanted, I don't see, other groups supporting us, allowing such access to such an important gas facility, especially after the 9/11 incident. From what I understand and from what I've been told, we want to keep every gas facility secure.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I think that's all I have for now.
And Chris?
Thank you, sir.
How long after blasting do you, I know if it's immediate, but how far down the road do you keep monitoring? Is it just a matter of leaking? Just wondering about, not so much the neighbor's house right now, but your lines. At what point do you say, all right, this worked fine, and we're good, we're good to go? Is it right away? How long do you monitor? Is your current monitors in place of the things you monitor? You do extra monitoring after blasting?
Samuel alluded to this before, whenever blasting is involved, normally residences, they're imperiled, like Tom was saying. It'll be less so in this case because the Algonquin pipeline, the proximity of it to any blasting, so they're going to require a written plan of the blasting and its control measures and its monitoring, and that's all going to have to be vetted by Eversource, by Enbridge, and also, I'm sorry?
And also, I think the state also.
Right, so whatever plan they had, I think the length of time that they're gonna monitor it would be in that plan. I think it varies from time to time, from instance to instance, but it's not like you have to monitor it for a long time, if that's the question, for like weeks and weeks.
That was what I was getting at.
But that would all be laid out in a plan that everyone could review prior. Again, the hope is that blasting won't be required, but if it is, there'll be comprehensive plans developed to ensure that it's done safely.
Okay. On the set of plans I'm looking at that were supplied, it indicates there's an 8-foot vinyl fence on the street side. Is that accurate at the top of the mound from the street up?
What's shown here is this is the 8-foot vinyl fence along the road, this orange line here. So it's actually at the, it is along the top of the hill, so that it, provides the most screening that's possible. And that's shown in those cross sections that we included in the presentation tonight.
And then immediately after that is a chain link with some barbed wire on
Yeah,
top.
that's the security fence.
How far are they separated? I can't tell by the plans.
They're virtually close. I mean,
2 feet, a foot?
I'm Eric Gordon from Odin, approximately 2.5 to 3 feet separation between both fences.
Okay. Abby, is 8 feet on the street something they need a waiver for?
They have they're proposing, or they have an application in for a special permit with the zoning board of appeals scheduled for February 13th because it's 8 feet in height. It is allowed by special permit.
Right.
That's
And-
what I-
And we recently provided an amendment to the building application in the zoning board of appeals to include that 8-foot fence, because that was not part of the original proposal.
And the other gates, I saw the gates right adjacent to the parking area, the paved area, those are chain with barbed wire on it, correct?
Yeah, those are right along the driveway you're talking?
Right.
Yeah, that's.
Not the driveway coming up Woodland Road.
If you speak into the microphone,
Yeah. Can you
just
hold
for,
the mic?
there's
Sorry.
folks at home.
Sorry, yeah, so those are for vehicle access for Enbridge and for Eversource to get equipment in now to do maintenance and so forth.
And at the last meeting here, I had asked about what improvements were going to be made for what the neighbors are going to be seeing on the driveway. And I
Right.
saw a very quick rendering.
Yeah, so we've,
Nothing was made mention of the new gate that will be,
so we did try to address that, so it's been recessed away from the road, and then it'll be a much more ornate fence, that one of the renderings does actually.
yeah, I
show
saw
that
it,
if you
but
want.
it got moved on so very quickly. And
We did try to address that comment.
And the landscape plan I have here doesn't show anything on the hill going up from Woodland. Maybe I'm not looking at an updated this.
Yep, that and the other sheet below it.
Yeah,
I just, I didn't see what types of trees are being planted between Woodland and that,
This is.
beyond the final fence.
This area here between Woodland and the vinyl fence is remaining.
What it is.
What it is.
What
It's
about beyond the
untouched.
vinyl fence, going
Well-
up the slope?
Well, this is essentially on the top of the slope, and then as you cut, then from this point, you go down to the building site. And we don't have vegetation on that side because it's going down slope.
I get
And it's
that.
gonna be a cut rock.
Right, no, that makes
vegetated
sense.
slope,
There's no
so-
need to put trees there.
Yep, yep, so the existing vegetative buffer will be retained between the
So
fence
nothing
and the
will be
road.
added, it's whatever's there now.
Correct.
We'll have a vinyl fence and another chain link fence that no one will see.
Correct.
Behind the vinyl fence.
Correct.
Okay. That's it, all my other questions.
Bill?
Well, while we're on the fence, what color is the vinyl?
The screening fence, we have, I think, beige color.
Beige?
Yes, sir.
And the durability of that vinyl?
The typical vinyl fence, we can get you a cut sheet or something, or target.
So, I mean, they're engineered vinyl fences, I mean, durability, 20.
Yeah, you have to talk into the mic. Yes.
Eric Borden from Odin. This is be a typical run-of-the-mill, standard vinyl fencing. I believe that, as long as they don't receive, too much solar influence from the trees that'll be around it, I mean, you're looking at 20-plus years.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was a plan, if they've been lasting so long that you replace them. Now, one other question is, weekdays, your hours of work are 9 to 4? And on the weekend, on Saturday, it's 7 to 6?
That's the trucking, that's the trucking from the site. The indication was to avoid the high commuting times of the early morning and late afternoon.
Well, I'm thinking of the
early
residents on a Saturday, starting at 7 instead of a later time.
Okay, well, I mean, those timings were for the trucking to and, of materials off-site and on-site.
Yeah, I understand the
So
trucking.
that-
I'm just thinking of,
Yeah.
if I lived there, I'd say, what the heck? I'm up at 7 o'clock on a weekday, but I'd like to sleep a little in on a Saturday, and the trucks will be going. So I don't know if we could revise that at all.
I think I get your point, but you might want to consider this. If you reduce the trucking hours, you run the risk of extending, the duration during which we're gonna make truck trips. If you leave it the way it is, then the advantage is we complete our truck trips, within a short amount of time compared to when you reduce the window. If you follow what I'm trying to say.
How many weeks are you proposing to need trucks in and out?
I think at the front end of the project, I like to think we're gonna have heavy truck trips. Front end, I mean, perhaps between May and probably July. This is just a rough estimate. I think we're gonna have heavy truck trips during that time because that is when we're mostly gonna be removing rock.
Just one point on that. As was mentioned, with reducing the cut down to 670 cubic yards with assuming a 10 cubic yard truck, we're talking, 67 truck trips there to get that material off-site. The other trucks to and from the site would be delivering materials, delivering the prefab buildings, the equipment, things like that. But I think the heaviest truck trips would be with the material being hauled off-site, and if that's spread over, a month or two, that's, 20 to 40 days of 67 truck trips. So it's, a couple of those trucks a day, if it's spread over that month, over that period of time to cut that slope and haul it off-site.
Great.
Okay.
And all my questions have been asked from other board members. Abby, I saw that there were some comments from the staff within the packet for this.
We've touched on all of them, I think, a little bit. Conservation Commission has approved this project. The applicant is aware that they have to file a building permit for the fence and has also submitted the revised plans, including the fence special permit, to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the Zoning Board is having their hearing on February 13th, and the Fire Department has reviewed the revised plans and didn't have any more comments at this time.
So no other questions from the board, so I'd open it up for public comments. So if you just line up at the microphone for any questions for the applicant. Yes, sure. So just, you just line up at the microphone and.
My name is Christine Lang, and my question is, what is the plan for signage?
So if the applicant wants to respond to that, and I assume it's the signage on the gate?
Yeah, so at the top of Gloucester,
Yeah.
Runs perpendicular to Woodland. So presently, there are, in the past, several years, there have been anywhere from 4 to 6 signs. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be consolidation, of the signs.
Yeah, the other gate was,
These signs are on the
So-
driveway gate? Is that what you're
Signage
referring to?
on the gates.
yeah.
Not
So on the
anywhere
g-
else in the neighborhood, just on the gate?
Just on the gates. Yeah. Yeah, they're,
Drove by it.
they're metal, they're rusted, they're broken,
So can
and
you speak to that? Any update or consolidation of the signs that are currently?
I'm glad they brought this up. So obviously, we're gonna be replacing the gate. I'm wondering, does the board think our signs are due for replacement? I don't know what the conditions are. I'm just, is that something we need to take care of?
I remember the gate looked, there were signs all over the place. I don't,
What do you think?
The gate has been assessed back to replace the signs. There is some probably required company signs so that you must meet.
do you have the previous gate easy to pull up from that last meeting?
I don't know if I
Yeah.
don't have it.
Yeah,
It was in the pictures, right? It was the
Seems
pictures.
like everybody's on board with replacing that, so we can.
Maybe what you could do is identify the things you want to convey, come up with a new sign strategy, work it out with Abby, and it can be I think it can be an administrative review, personally. I can't speak for the other board members, but.
And as Steve mentioned, the gate, which is, currently out by the road, is being recessed in. If the signs, need to be on the gate, they'll be on the gate, so they'll be recessed off the road.
Perhaps
and not so
instead of just
visible.
reattaching, maybe
Yeah,
we could,
Yeah.
it's a neighborhood, we could spruce it up a little bit.
Laura Bradford, I'm on Gloucester Road. We walk our dogs in the neighborhood all the time. I know most of our neighbors here. We're all a bit concerned about the looks of it, obviously. But let me start off by saying I support this project 100%. Anytime you upgrade equipment that's nearly 60 years old, you'll get better safety in return for it. One of the concerns I have is by adding the heating system, you're actually increasing the capacity, the throughput of this station. What's the current capacity of the station? What will be the future capacity of the station?
The current is,
We need you to have a
Yeah, you just
microphone,
gotta go.
sorry.
the new design flow rate is 215,000 standard cubic feet per hour. The existing one, I think, is a little bit over 100. I'd have to look at the historical, but it's a little over 100,000, I believe, is the highest. I can get that figure for you. But that's based on historical data. But that's the new design figure.
You're doubling capacity.
Right, but that takes into account future growth. So there's no plan for that immediately to be taking, your distribution system to be taking that much initially. Eversource is planned on incremental growth over time, so that this, station will be durable, wouldn't have to be replaced again shortly based on increase in load growth.
So doing this won't just turn the faucet higher so it comes out faster, it's just, they has the capacity. Is that
Right.
what you're saying?
Right, and and the capacity, it's based on demand. So just because it can flow 215,000 an hour doesn't mean that your system wants to take that much, at least not initially. Over time, as load growth, as the load grows, more and more will be, you'll have more load within your system, and the station will be able to provide it.
Okay.
So you do think you've done projections? You think there will be an increase in demand that people aren't going
Well,
to be
that's pretty
reducing
typical.
their-
Distribution companies do that type of load. They look at their system and they apply like an annual percentage of growth. Depending on how densely populated the area is, they might use more or less of a percentage annually. So when they do their load projections, they typically use like 30-year growth, and they might use 1 or 2% annually, that kind of thing. But they also have the ability, correct me if I'm wrong, Samuel, this is integrated with 2 other stations that feed this area, and they've done some infrastructure improvements where this station has the ability to feed more of an area than it did in the past. And you also get operational flexibility, where, like, if you had to do some maintenance on another station, this station could feed more of the existing distribution system than it otherwise could have. So it gives Eversource greater flexibility to service the town.
Just to add to that, I mean, obviously, I like to think this town is always looking to attract, be it businesses or companies. As a company, we always want to be ready to support, such growth. If we don't upgrade, then we can't support such growth. Like I said, I don't know what the design criteria was back in the 50s when the station was built, but think of it this way. Has the town of Westwood experienced growth between 1950 and now? I don't know the answer, but I like to think my guess would be as good as anybody's guess. We'll probably have grown. So we want to position ourselves in a way that we can continue to serve our customers. People buy new heating equipment, all those things, they add load to the system. And that was actually what one of the primary drivers for this project. Station couldn't take, too much load, so by increasing the capacity, we are better able to, support any growth in the area. So,
Thank you.
It's way beyond this discussion, but I like the safety, the enhanced safety is something that definitely makes this worthwhile in the larger scheme of things, but I would just suggest that in 30 years it may not be necessary as we complete a transition away from fossil fuels. So I would be surprised if the double capacity was ever utilized.
we'll see. Thank you.
It's interesting because there's two metering stations actually in this area for Eversource. They not only supply our area, Westwood, but many other areas. So there may be a small indirect benefit to Westwood, but I don't agree with your comments in terms of the overall. When I did research on these metering stations, they had suggested a study that was done by Trinity Consultants that was a 99.99% safety factor. That means one incident for 10,000 opportunities. Where I operate in the specialty chemical industry, you have 10,000 opportunities every day for a safety, environmental, or process safety incident. So I'm not really impressed with that number. What I'd like to see is something from Eversource that demonstrates their compliance with safety within the state of Massachusetts for their facilities. Would you be able to provide that? Certainly you have incident rates available for your facilities. Near misses included.
So, I want to make sure I understand your question. You want me to provide evidence of near misses or statistics on near misses? Is that?
Actual incidents as well as near misses at all of your facilities in Massachusetts. I'd like my neighbors to be assured that this is a safe facility. They're rather closely located. We all are actually. If anything happened to this facility, I guarantee you I would not have a home.
I think you have a valid concern. There are, just like any design work, there are codes that we have to follow. Again, when we made this design, we followed, if you review part 192, if you review the Massachusetts Gas Safety Code, anytime we design any pipeline work, be it pipeline on the street, be it a city gate station like what we have, we are bound by that code. So this project is no different from any other Eversource design project. It complies to the, safety standards that we have to abide by. So I don't know if my response addressed your question. You're wondering.
I'm talking about building, but I'm also including in that operation and maintenance. What I'm talking about is incident rates while you're operating the equipment, not necessarily designing it. The codes are great, I agree with them. You're designing to the most current codes. But how do you operate this system? What's your track record?
I have to admit, I don't have statistics or data on the track record. However, I would submit that the existing facility that is in your neighborhood is 56 years old, without redundancy and not built to current codes. The proposed facility is being built to current codes, which has greater factor of safety than 56-year-old codes. It has redundancy built in, which the current facility does not. So I would submit that a facility that's built in 2020 with current contemporary codes, equipment, redundancy, telemetry to be able to monitor it remotely is much safer than the facility that's there today.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but a lot of the safety resides in terms of how the operators address the incidents. And you said that we have emergency shutdown valves in place, but the information goes back to Southborough, where you have operators 24/7, 365. They make the decision whether to initiate that shutdown. I've worked shift work. I don't know how many other people work shift work in an industrial setting. But I know what goes on at night, particularly on weekends and on holidays. If we're relying on an emergency system, on humans, to pay attention and shut that down in time, I'm a little concerned. I'd rather see an automatic shutdown system in place that overrides human error. We should have the technology available to initiate that. So do you have that, and can you install that? Have you looked at it? Is there a reason why we can't do it?
So, yeah, you're right. I did say something about us having the gas controllers in Southborough. That is not the only option we have. Yes, we have equipment on site that can take control in case of emergency.
But is it human initiated, or is it automatically initiated?
Not human initiated, automatically
You
initiated.
had said an operator would initiate the ESD.
I said in addition to what we have in Southborough.
I don't know what you have in Southborough, so enlighten me.
Sure, the normal way that the gas is regulated, there's a valve whose job is to cut the pressure to the delivery pressure. There's a redundant valve that's dedicated solely to overpressure protection that's watching that exact same pressure. So if you had a failure in one valve, the other valve is there automatically with no action by any human to do that. That's a code requirement for overpressure protection. So you have redundant systems in place. So it would be the failure of multiple things. Before, what Samuel's saying is they would see that in Southborough and say, we've had multiple failures, I'm going to have to hit the ESD. That should never arise because there are enough systems in place that would automatically step up.
And while you're here, can you answer this question? Do we have any PRVs at that particular location?
That's what I'm talking, the pressure, you say PRV,
Okay, you
so
said
pressure
ESDs,
regulator.
and
Well, that's a.
shutdown versus a pressure relief
Correct,
device,
correct.
right?
So the normal operating would be a pressure regulator. So it's taking the pipeline pressure and it's reducing it to the delivery pressure. So from hundreds of PSIG to like 60 PSIG. And not only are there redundant runs, each run itself has redundant valves in it that operate automatically. So if there was a failure on one, the second one takes over. So not only does that mean it's still safely operating, they can actually detect that in Southborough and send somebody out to determine what happened with the initial valve. So the ESD that Samuel's talking about is another layer, a tertiary device, where if both valves failed, which is extremely unlikely, then you would have yet another measure to actually initiate a shutdown.
Okay, so your ESD is equivalent to PRV then?
No, when you say PRV,
It's
I
not
think
a relief
pressure.
valve. Relief valve.
No, it's not a relief valve.
Okay, do we have any PRVs on that?
No, what they do is
Okay.
they have monitor, they're called monitor regulators. So you have two regulators in series rather than a regulator and a relief valve. That would also be an acceptable form of overpressure protection, but the convention and best practice is to use a monitor or two regulators in series, because that way if you had an overpressure incident, the monitor takes over, there's no release of gas to the atmosphere.
I think that's what I'm getting at for the residents.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the noise is supposed to be less than 55 decibels at the nearest receptor. How is that going to be measured, and how will the information be conveyed? Is there anything that generates noise at this particular facility? Initially, I thought it was a compressor station, but it's not. It's a metering facility. So is noise a concern at this facility?
You mean in the course of operation,
Correct.
not building?
No, we know buildings can be quite loud. We're okay with that.
So the reduction of pressure does cause noise. There are programs that calculate that based on like peak differential pressures and peak flow rate. In this instance, the loudest predicted value would be within the buildings. And the buildings themselves are designed to contain the noise as well. So there are measures that are taking place that's part of the design criteria, is figuring out how loud they're going to be.
I'm fairly confident they'll be less than 55 dB at the nearest receptor.
If it's not, there are measures that can be taken. Let me say that. The predicted values of the regulator manufacturers indicate that it's not going to be the case. That's going to be okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But in practice, if something did happen, there are measures that can be taken after the fact to try and contain the noise even more.
And do we have more questions or?
Yeah,
Okay, so I just want to keep them moving because it's 10 o'clock and,
Wait for this. 2 hours.
yeah.
There's a filter station, right? So it's gonna
It's a filter,
filter,
yeah.
gentleman here explained that there's an air filter, and then that there's a dropout for condensate.
Yeah, so the first piece of equipment that you hit off of the transmission line is a filter separator.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And then there's a dropout, so you have condensate collecting in a sump. I would assume that would be hazardous waste, because of the nature of the gas.
So that, the level of the, what it does is that vessel is designed to remove very, very small particles of liquid and solid, and there's a sump that's integral to the vessel where this stuff would collect. That has a level switch and indicator on it, so that if it did fill up, most of these don't get anything in them appreciably at all, but they're there just in case. And if it did accumulate, then it would generate an alarm, and Enbridge would know that they have to come, and there's a truck unloading box where they can displace the, whatever materials collected automatically.
So you have a high alarm and a high.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right. And I will cut my question short.
No, I just want to make sure that you get it in, but I just wanted to keep it moving and efficient.
Okay. So one of the issues is we have a lot of children in our neighborhood, and particularly on Saturdays, May through July, you're gonna have a lot of kids out in the street playing football, and Dave's got some really great kids that really enjoy the store. They're great. I would assume the way the traffic would be based would go through Gloucester, which is.
Up to the mic.
So the traffic will go through, sorry, it will go through Gloucester. We have a lot of children playing on that street. What are we gonna do to ensure their safety with all the construction traffic, not just the trucks? The trucks I'm not so worried about. We've got 2 or 3 a day at the most, maybe on a Saturday 4. But in addition to that, you have the work crews, you have all the construction vehicles coming in with supplies and whatnot. What are we doing about that? The police officer during high construction time will be placed at the location, but the street itself, where are our protections for our children?
I don't know what additional measures could be taken. It's a road. It's intended for automobile use. We
Yeah.
know people frequent it occasionally, but
Okay, can I make a suggestion?
absolutely.
It's a cut-through right now for morning commutes, and people go quite fast on it. Well, fortunately, it's a morning commute. It's between 7 and 8. The kids are still kind of inside. But with this, and I know how construction people drive, I'm enforcing it all the time when I'm on plant sites. What we need is auditing, so a police officer stationed at the bottom or the middle, basically looking out for speeding vehicles. I think that would be appreciated, periodic audits.
So not for these construction, but for the cut-throughs that currently exist. Is that what you're saying?
No, for this construction in particular, the cut-throughs I will take up with the police department. I mean, that's their business.
would help, I'm out there every
morning. Okay,
Yeah, walking the dog, it's a literal
So I
assault.
want to second Warren's point, though.
No one can hear you. I'm sorry, sir, but without a microphone.
But, you know, for the construction traffic, I know how these guys tend to drive. Is there something we can do
Well,
to help with that?
I mean, part of, one of the comments and conditions was to have a police officer as part of the traffic management plan to be present on site. Part of the reason of having police officers at construction sites in Massachusetts versus the civilian flagmen is because number one, the visibility of police officers tends to cause drivers to exhibit better behavior. But number two, it also allows them to enforce traffic laws, pull people over, speeding tickets, citations, which the flagmen, don't have the capacity to do. So by having that being, part of the condition, you have a police presence at the site, which is going to, lead to that type of behavior. That's, the reason that, in Massachusetts, that's done at construction sites.
Well, I would agree with that if I had ever seen them actually enforcing the laws with all the speeders that pass them. So, but maybe we can work with the officer and have them located at different sections just to ensure that the rules are enforced. That would be very beneficial if we can do that. So there's a lot of bushes and shrubs that we planted at this facility. That's great. They're planted one time, they're in. What if there's a die-off? What if they don't make it? How are we going to maintain these bushes?
I
to
believe they're
ensure-
required in perpetuity.
Yes.
So they're on the plan. If they die, then they need to be replanted.
Okay, and would the neighbors have to complain about that, or let somebody know? What's the mechanism?
So what is the mechanism from the building inspector?
Yes, I mean, we have to know about it, so
Yeah, I mean, it certainly
we
helps.
notified and we would
Phone call
notify the.
to the town building department.
And also, the standard landscaping contracts include, when new plants are installed, have a warranty period that the landscaping contractor is responsible for in terms of transplant die-off to, replace those within the specified period of time, whether it be 1 year or 2 years, whatever in the contract specification. That's typically the time we'd have the greatest chance of die-off because of transplant stress. So that's, part of the contract. After that warranty period, it would be, monitoring them and, maintaining them. But the intent is to have native type trees and shrubs so that they would just grow as wild vegetation would once they've become established.
And then lastly, the vinyl fence, we talked about that. Vinyl fences aren't just vinyl fences. There's different grades of vinyl fences that you were trying to get at. I would recommend that we install a commercial grade vinyl fence, which is thicker and withstand the environment better, versus a residential Home Depot off-the-shelf kind of fence. So if we could do that, the fence will last longer, and then also sink it into concrete. Don't just put it in the ground like most of the contractors around here do. Sink it into concrete, make it sturdy, make it last. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Bob Rake, and I'm 17 Gloucester Road. My concern is the construction on it. Is the timeline is what, May to July? Or is that just for the excavation?
That's for, do you want to just state the start to finish, the timeline?
We think sometime from end of April through November perhaps.
Okay. And at peak time, how many people do you think are going to be on site?
I like to think a typical construction crew, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, like 10 perhaps. 10?
Well, close to the maximum, at different points of the operation, whether it's something was being delivered or not.
Okay. And while they're constructing, where are those people going to park? Do you have facility for them?
That is a good question.
Because we're seeing Eversource on our street a lot. A lot of your people come in their own cars. They'll sit in the truck, and there'll be 3 cars with them, and they'll park on the street. So we have to have a place for them to park. Also, when you're trucking, you're going to have 6 trucks trucking. Sometimes you're going to end up with 3 or 4 of them lined up on the street in front of my house. Now, you have that big right-of-way. Are you doing anything with putting anything out on the right-of-way?
You mean the one that runs east-west? Yeah, I mean, the right-of-way is gonna serve as a location for our office trailer that we're gonna use during construction.
Okay.
2 trailer perhaps. And you also said something about if we have any parking for the crew vehicles.
Yeah.
We're also looking at that as a possible parking location, unless, we find a good neighbor that can.
Can we get him up to the mic? No, there you go. Come up with some cash, you know?
And you gotta step a little closer to the microphone so they can record it for the.
Yeah, so I guess the right-of-way, some things that we're looking to do with the right-of-way, like I said, the office trailers that we're gonna use during construction, the 2 trailer that we're gonna use for the tools during construction. Also, a discussion came up on possible parking for the construction crew. Right-of-way certainly can serve that purpose. We are willing to work with any neighbors that have any property that we can use as parking during construction. We're not gonna say no if that chance comes up, but our plan right now is the right-of-way.
So you can park cars on that right-of-way
Yes.
going up?
I can't remember.
Where
what
the
it
gate is there now, you can open that gate.
There will be some limits to your parking. As part of the project, you have to determine your proposed disturbed area. You can see the limit of work is outlined by this dashed line here. And so that would be your limit of disturbance. And as you move up the right-of-way, you will notice that there are located wetlands within their buffer zones, and it's the project's intention not to disturb that area. So we couldn't necessarily use that as a right-of-way of parking. On top of that is that's actually Entergy's right-of-way, and although they have involvement in the project, they would have some say and probably not want a lot of disturbance in parking over their existing pipelines. And so,
So you haven't really made a plan for where you're gonna park your cars and trucks and,
well, the project right now is in its design phase. I mean, as constructors can get chosen, they can make their own transportation plans, whether they bring people in one truck or two trucks. As the
well, the town is aware anyhow.
As the construction.
There's a parking problem
Yes.
there.
As
That's
the
all.
construction is sequenced, I mean, there is some room.
You can jump in,
Work
Dave.
is gonna be done. in
Abby,
certain
could I
areas.
just jump in for a second? I was wondering, Abby, have we done things for larger projects where we might designate a plan like this to say if there's a large work crew, then they wouldn't just park all over the neighborhood, but to have them park on Hartford Street or have them park somewhere? And have we done things like that with other?
We have, I mean, at University Station we did, they used some staging areas because there's other commercial properties, but I can't think, because this isn't a residential
I guess
neighborhood.
I'm hearing the concern is that it turns into like 3 trucks and then 4
Well,
pickup trucks.
yeah, I mean,
and
we
like
have the
people-
problem already, and it's only a pumping station. They don't come, occasionally they come, you know, they'll come with a crane and a backhoe and 3 trucks. You know, they're there for 2 days.
But it might also, it would be good to maybe address to find something that would help address the traffic in terms of if they were parking in designated areas or something, so you knew what to expect, and avoided kind of willy-nilly all over the place. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud if there's any way that we might have a plan for that.
All right, my other concern is the top of Gloucester Road, where your gate is. I believe you said there's gonna be a vinyl fence and a chain link fence. But it's existing vegetation. You're not gonna change that, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Has anybody taken any pictures to see what that vegetation is, or are we just gonna say it was grass? And when those trees fall over, if you excavate, is anything gonna replace any of that stuff? Right now, there's, you know, some scrub trees here and there, but at the end,
Depending on what it looks like, I mean, you could assume that just based on this design, everything that's within this area up to this limited disturbance would be cleared just due to the land. And anything that exists between here and the end of the street will stay. And I believe as part of the requirement that this limited disturbance will need to be staked prior to construction and adhered to, there will be no work beyond that limited disturbance. So after that is staked, anything outside cannot and will
who
not.
owns that outside?
That's owned by Eversource.
That is still Eversource.
It's still Eversource, so it's your property. Eversource property. So what are you gonna do with that? When those trees die off and fall over, what happens then?
Did they die off right now? Are they dead right now?
Well, they could be.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, nobody's made any thought about that. You've planted on both sides, but coming up Gloucester Road, it's existing. Well, it's not existing very much.
So just like you said, to the extent possible, we don't want to disturb any areas outside our limit of disturbance.
Yeah, I mean,
We are going
it's on
to
the
try
existing
not to
conditions
impact those.
not shown on the proposed.
To answer your question, what happens when it falls? I'm just wondering, right now, have we had any issues with that vegetation?
Yeah, I think part of the issue is, for a landscaping plan, this is what we plan to be put in now.
Right.
A landscaping plan typically doesn't pick out existing trees and say that these will be replaced in the future.
Well, I think if somebody went up there and looked and said, okay, the existing trees is one birch tree and there's a little maple tree there, and you're planting all of this and all of this, but you're not doing anything from the Gloucester roadside.
If I may interject,
Yeah.
they're all deciduous trees, so
Yeah,
6
exactly.
months out of the year, you're looking at this place. That's all. Everybody else gets evergreen shrubs, they get conifers. You have deciduous.
Yeah, so is this a mixed?
Abby, would you mind just going through to the slide that shows
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
cross-section number 2, please?
Is that,
So I think
this
it's,
one? Oh,
keep
two.
one,
It's not too bad,
the next one. There we go.
Yeah, we don't have any of those.
No, what I'm getting, what I'm showing here is in terms of the new facility, the topography and the 8-foot fence lead to a visual barrier because of the hillock that's present, so that the building won't be seen from Woodland Road and from Gloucester Road because of the hill and the fence.
But I believe you put the vinyl fence behind the shrubs, right, on the north and west?
Those trees are just, that are shown on here are just representative that there's existing vegetation on that hill that's being maintained, that's being retained.
Retained, not maintained.
Retained. And that on top of the hill is the vinyl fence, so that the grade change in the fence obscures the view of the proposed facility
Right.
from the road.
Right. But on the sides of it, you've planted shrubs.
On the sides of it, we've planted.
Those shrubs. Where's the fence?
South and the north.
The fence is behind the shrubs, right? Yeah,
Correct.
there you go.
Correct. This is the fence along here
Okay.
because of the residents
Right.
to the south, and we have the vegetation
Okay.
here for the residents.
So now the residents that are over here get to look at your vinyl fence when those trees are gone,
They're filtered through the existing vegetation.
as long as it lasts.
Well,
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
It's native vegetation,
Okay.
and.
Do you have any recommendations, Dave?
So why don't we
regenerates on its
plant
own.
Feel free
right
to
around
jump
it?
in.
Why are we not giving all the neighbors?
We've proposed no disturbance beyond there, so that it would, so we can retain the vegetation that's there. It is deciduous, but, that's what's there now, and the hill also hides the facility.
And what's here now?
In there is mostly deciduous vegetation.
Okay, and then you're replacing it?
What's shown there is a mixture, I'd have to go back and take a look at the landscape plan as to
Here and here.
the species that are there.
They have the same deciduous trees as we have, except you're putting a whole blind of evergreens on both sides.
Those views aren't.
You want to just grab the mic?
By the hill.
Pardon?
Just grab, if you're just talking to the mic, yeah.
I think, why don't we, if you could talk to the mic, and then I want to make sure, we should make sure that there's people lined up here, that
Okay,
everybody
yeah.
gets a chance to
The
speak.
views you're talking about, I mean, what the landscape architect did was their best job, and to screen it at a level line of sight. If you were in the parcel to the south, there is no elevated
I
hill
understand
that
that,
obscures that,
yeah.
so they would have a chance to see, maybe an existing chain link fence or part of the building through that fence, and so by vegetating it, they did their best to protect the views
I understand
from
you.
the side, but.
You put the trees there and the vinyl fence, and then you just put a vinyl fence here and said, when those trees are gone, I'll be looking at the vinyl fence. Why aren't we doing the same thing we're doing for these neighbors, for this neighbor? I don't know.
I believe just, here you have two direct abutters, the property abuts the street. I mean, it's not a direct abutter, there is an
So that's a
existing
different
filter.
explanation. You're saying,
I-
because
I'm
the
just-
street between me and your facility, you're covered. I don't like it.
Hi, Mary Feely. I'm a butter. And I have a couple of questions that I know you've said were resolved, and that is the lighting at the facility. I want to know when the lights will be on, when they'll be off. Are you have shut off so that they're not on during the night? What is the plan for that?
Yeah, so the lights, the only lighting, they're mounted to the buildings themselves, so they're only right about the 7-foot level, right by the doorways. And they're only gonna be on if someone is there to actually get into the building.
Okay, just like now, there's no real change.
Correct. There are no light poles or anything like that.
Okay.
Yep, and the light fixtures are such that they direct the light just focus straight down. They're not.
And they do disperse now quite
Yeah,
brightly.
These fixtures are designed to have focused light.
Okay. Yeah, that ends. And then what are the times that you're going to be working? I know you can only bring the trucks in between 9 and 4 and 7 and, but when is your actual construction, the work going to be done on the property?
7 to 5.
7 to 5? Okay. I'm with my neighbor. I can't even back out of my driveway now. If you're going to add all that extra traffic in there, I don't think, people can't imagine that these little streets are getting it all, but Waves must have decided that this is a really good shortcut. So we have a lot of traffic in the morning. And
20 to 30 cars.
right. So you put that on to a regular commute time, and you really do have an issue, probably a safety issue. You have kids out there for buses, and you have residents trying to get out of their driveways already. So that might be something that you might want to talk to the police about, or, getting someone in just maybe for those high-level areas to kind of monitor the traffic, because it's going to be pretty bad. So, thank you.
Hi, I just had a quick question about potential blasting. My son is a student at Merrimack College in North Andover and was directly affected by the Columbia gas explosion and fires in the fall of 2018. My question is, if mechanical removal of rock is not sufficient and blasting is required, does the project stop in order to get a blasting plan in place and get approvals by all of the agencies, or is a blasting plan put into place concurrently just in case it happens to be needed? I'm concerned about the project, which is already, sounds like it's 6-7 months long, getting extended even longer if we have to stop the project in order to get a blasting plan and approvals.
Yes, the blasting plan would have to be developed and submitted to, at the very least, Algonquin, Eversource, and any other state agency that would be interested in reviewing it. It'd have to be approved prior to implementation.
Could you, approximately how long would that be, do you think?
Depends on how, so say the contractor takes a week to develop it, and it's gonna go to Enbridge, and it's gonna be at least, it's hard to gauge the pipeline companies, how quickly they respond to things. I would think, a week for development, at least a week for review. It would be a couple of weeks, I think, to develop and get reviewed at the least.
Just one other thing to consider. That doesn't, again, the construction plan hasn't been developed, the contractor hasn't been selected, but there is opportunities to pivot. I mean, if they're excavating this area here and they come to a solution, they could, a contractor might not just completely stop and walk away. They would work with Eversource, and maybe they decide to work on the other side of the parcel while the project's being done. It's within everybody's interest to execute and get this project done as efficiently as possible, as Eversource wants to have this done for the next heating season, which happens in next November or December. And so, you deal with construction, challenges day to day. The people on site would probably make a call to safely and efficiently move their, work plan to another area while this is being developed.
One last comment. Everyone has worked hard with their plans, both Enron and the board. Most of the neighbors did not know Eversource. What did I say?
Enron. I had to correct you.
Most of the people on Gloucester Road did not know about this project. So I'm sorry to say that there was a drop somewhere in having information dispersed. So I'm glad we all got to come tonight and give our viewpoints. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. So that concludes the public session. So Abby, as far as this, what do we need to look at tonight for as far as the conditions that were, I mean, Tom did a great job with his review that drove.
I prepared a draft of 13 conditions.
But in addition to the conditions, I think the concerns that the residents brought up need to be addressed. So whether that be a condition that the Eversource meet with the residents to sort of mitigate their concerns. If not, they're just getting left unanswered.
I think most things are answered in the draft conditions, or like couple maybe, that, that we're about to get through. We've been here for a while.
Yeah.
Just getting to the deliberation part. I have drafted 13, a couple more came out of this, if you want to go through them.
Yes.
Now, the first one was about the landscaping. And plantings shall be approved as shown on the submitted plan revised through January 8th. And this has the plantings that they have to be installed prior to occupancy. Unless occupancy occurs during the winter months, then it has to be enough available. And then it also talks about any replacement of any trees that may die. They need to be replaced in kind. Now, I know there was a comment earlier from Debbie about that landscape screen. They are proposing a row of a double staggered row of evergreen trees and shrubs in front of the fence. I mean, typically, we would say, I think our zoning bylaw calls for a landscape impervious screen to come together within 3 years of plantings. We could add that language in there, that, something of that effect, if you want to amend that, expand on that first condition. And so number 2 is that the applicant's responsible for filing any other permits and application. That includes things like the other blasting permits or the zoning board application. Condition 3 is the standard condition related to the time frame within 2 years. A copy of this approval on the project plans must be kept on site during construction. That's number 4. Any alterations, number 5, any alterations or modifications shall be submitted in writing to the planning office and reviewed and approved prior to implementing. Number 6, the existing pavement on Woodland Road shall be protected from damage from loading and unloading of material and equipment related to the proposed construction. Number 7, the proposed construction entrance shall be replaced when the stone becomes clogged with dirt. So that's always effective. Clean daily and street sweeping as needed. Now, condition number 8, this is what the applicant had talked about a little bit. You have your standard construction hours, which is for kind of all noise and site work. One of the suggestions was to limit the truck traffic carrying the fill to and from the site. You could impose a tighter time frame. The applicant was looking for an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. during the weekdays and 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Your standard is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the week and noon to 7 on Sundays. So that's for the board to decide. If you want to just call out just the truck traffic to limit those hours.
So they're not looking for Sundays, based on this?
No.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the yellow highlighted part.
Sorry, the highlighted part was one of the suggestions that came out of the peer review report and the applicant's response.
Okay.
But pertaining to the trucks carrying the fill.
Right. Have we made amendments like this in the past for the trucks? I don't recall. For
Not
the
since,
idea,
not typically since I've been here, we haven't been. It's usually been pretty standard, but, I mean, you can. I think usually the thought is to help have the construction
But isn't
and.
is this project a little different because of, you know, typically think of that as the trucks, dump trucks go onto the site, pick up the material or drop it off or whatever and leave and all. And here, there's not room on the site to do, so there's gonna be a lot of, activity outside on the street. And that might, or is, I don't know,
They would have to go onto the site to be loaded and unloaded and, you know.
Right, but they're not, are they gonna park on the street or is just in and out easily? I don't.
Just want to just run over there. So people are watching through recording and at home, so that's why we need them.
I'm not certain how different this would be than from a regular site of removal or bringing.
Right, I mean,
dirt.
the existing building, the existing facility is generally in this portion of the site. The work is gonna be, the construction activity is gonna be beyond the existing facility. And so, I mean, the trucks will have to come in to, you know, do the earthworking in here and around here and then go off the site. So, I mean, the equipment in terms of the earthworking, loading and, you know, coming off site, that will all be on the site.
There is room on the site. I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
they're not gonna be.
But the trucks we're talking about are essentially dump trucks. They're.
Correct.
They want to move out. They're not, if the driver's not hanging out there, he makes his money by runs. No.
During the and like we were saying, that in terms of the volume, 670 cubic yards, it's not gonna be all cut and sitting there and then trucks. It's not gonna be like a sand and gravel operation where they're, you know, truck after truck. They're gonna be cutting, loading, taking it off, cutting, loading, taking it off. And it's gonna take time to do those cuts and have, you know, the material available during, you know, during the earthworking. It's not, like I said, it's not, you know, like you have trucks being loaded and, you know, being shipped out, so.
Dwight makes an excellent point, just the nature of the excavation. It's gonna take time. They'll remove the rock, stockpile, the truck will be brought in, and then they'll resume excavating again. So you know, the neighbors who might be concerned about a long line of trucks up the street just waiting to be filled, that will not be the case in this project, just because the nature of the operations wouldn't even allow for it. So I don't really think it should be a concern here.
All right, so I'm thinking like on the hours, we have not typically made exceptions, then, no, we should stick with our general conditions.
All right, keep it just the standard.
I mean, unless,
yeah.
and I would say if there
Yeah.
were something unique about the project, but otherwise we'll find ourselves, you know, changing our position on everything that comes to us.
Number 9, the weekly testing of the generator shall occur midday between Monday through Friday to limit noise impacts to abutters. Number 10, the applicant is responsible for repairing any damage which causes to sidewalks, street pavement, signage, or other features in the right-of-way after obtaining permission from Public Works. Number 11, all trucks carrying earth material from the project site shall be required to access the site from Woodland, from Gloucester, via Hartford, from High Street. Number 12, the applicant shall have a geotechnical engineer verify the soil classification within the footprint of the proposed basin after the demolition of the existing building and prior to the construction to verify the soil assumptions. Number 13, the applicant shall be required to submit a final as-built plan. And then new ones from tonight would be to submit a signage package to review. Could do that administratively to the town planner. For me to review prior to sign off on the sign permit, with signs that are, I guess, consolidating the existing signs on the property and less visible. I think that were the concerns. Another one was all exterior lighting shall be turned off when not in use in the evenings. I know there was talk about, excuse me, about police detail during construction. That's not something we typically have done before in the past. I mean, we did send out our project plans to the various staff during this review. However, we don't have a public safety officer at the moment reviewing the plans, but I haven't heard of any concerns with this project, so
Would that be part of the building permit process, to mandate that if the building inspector thought it was necessary?
No, I don't, I think it would be beyond the scope of a building permit, so
Why don't we suggest, suggest have a meeting with the safety officer with Paul Sicard to like see if there are things they can do, like they can put the flashing, the speed limit signs up and.
Or slow construction.
Just discuss if there's some way to mitigate the traffic, because it will be all coming up that one street and, just need some.
So, I could say something like applicant shall coordinate and be responsible for coordinating with the police department during construction for the, I guess, traffic enforcement and possible
Things
detail.
that will come up. It's just that maybe, how do we proactively deal with stuff like, I know on the street where I was, the street got a little narrower and then someone parked their car in one place and then a truck parks in another and you can't get through. And so it's just how do you anticipate anything like that?
Yeah.
Maybe just a meeting with the police to discuss if there could be designated, maybe suggest designated places from the park. I don't know how many vehicles they're expecting, but just, I think there should be some way to work this out. It doesn't have to be super formalized, but we can anticipate that there could be a lot of activity there.
Okay, maybe we could have a condition about, applicant shall coordinate with planning staff and police department, like a pre-construction meeting that will look at the traffic construction and see what can be done about that. I don't know. It's kind of have to be a little open-ended at this point. Like a pre-construction meeting with the police department, I think.
Can I suggest a transportation safety plan be developed for the project in coordination with the public safety officer?
I mean, actually, we don't have a public safety officer at the moment.
But we do have a police department.
We have a police department.
Experts in law enforcement, particularly of regulations like that on the road. So may I suggest a transportation safety plan be developed for Gloucester Road for the duration of the project? And then submitted to the residents for review. It's our road, it's our safety at stake.
I like the idea, I just don't know that it's not something we've defined before, so it's sort of.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time we start to do it, because with these construction projects and with the types of contractors you have these days, with unemployment being so low, I think we do need something in place, because we're not getting the right people in these jobs oftentimes, and they're not performing to the standards that we expect them to. I'd like at least to have a plan in place.
Yeah, and I think that meeting that you're describing, it would come out with some measures.
Well, I think it would be up to the police department. I mean, the police department may not suggest any changes. I mean, they have reviewed all of our plans in the past and have never made that suggestion, so there's probably a reason why it wasn't suggested. So I think it would just have to be coordinating with the,
Coordinate with
the
town planner.
town planner and police department.
We don't have, we don't have a public safety officer.
Paul is now a detective.
Oh.
Was there any other conditions that you thought of during the hearing?
Back to number one, it just occurred to me on the landscaping. Whereas I get why the decision by the landscape architect not to plant any trees out along Woodland, because you have the incline, you can't visually see anything, but there are existing trees depicted there, so they are relying to some extent on some of the trees, and they're making an effort to retain them. I think in addition to a planting plan, if we call it a landscape plan, those trees should be represented on the landscape plan. And I get they're much closer to death than a new plant because they're near their life expectancy.
Or maybe not.
Well, no, I
Maybe
meant,
not.
but
Yeah,
Eversource.
sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if we just represent them on the plan, as these other plants are represented on the plan, and say they have to be maintained within reason, and maybe we may keep a count, they need to be replaced with half the size caliper of their maturity, I don't know. I'm just trying to respond to the concerns of the neighbors who are used to looking at those trees. If they were to die on someone's property, they wouldn't necessarily expect to be rebuilt, or replanted, but this is a different entity from someone's ranch house. So,
I just want to call your attention that the existing trees, per the town survey requirements in diameter have been surveyed and shown in this area. The squiggly marks representing the canopy, but the
Right.
individual trees are depicted on these plans.
right, and I was just suggesting that they be considered just as integral to these plan as the planting plan of the new plants. That they be considered just as much a part of this project as the new plants that are being proposed.
Yeah, I would support that.
Okay, so you do have the existing conditions survey plan was in your packet submission?
And so do we have any other discussion regarding this for a motion? Seeing no discussion. Do you want to make a motion?
All right, I think we have some waivers first, right? So, motion that we approve the applicant's request. Make a motion that we approve the applicant's request for the two waivers because the project's proposal to demolish existing building and replace with two new buildings does not require the submission of a full traffic study and presentation model as required by section 7.3 of the zoning bylaw. This is waivers for a traffic study and a presentation model.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So that passes 5-0. And then
I make a motion to approve the applicant's EIDR and earth material movement application for the new gate station at 141 Woodland Road as prepared in the findings and conditions prepared by staff, the conditions of approval, which we just discussed.
So do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So that passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep,
We need to
close.
close. So
Make a motion to close this hearing?
do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So the hearing is closed. So it is late. Looking at I only have about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
So is there, what's that?
We can finish it.
Continue the
We can finish it. Oh, yeah.
But
The
which
open
of the
space-
items?
To
Oh, to continue the hearing, yeah, yeah.
Coming back, we have
Does somebody want to make a
I will
motion?
make a motion that we continue the public hearing on the open space and recreation plan to March 17 at this same location at Harvey Street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So it's moved. Far Reach Road.
Yeah, Far Reach Road, sorry. Yes. Yes, please, they've been waiting all night.
Grab the mic. Welcome. Just state your name and
Yeah, thank-
Hi, I'm John Joyce of Old Grove Partners. I come here today for an extension on an application we filed back on Far Reach for a free home development on 8.9 or 9 acres it was. I think we were leaving about 5 acres or 4+ acres of open space, and we were developing the rest of that. We pulled the permit in 2015, which was voted on unanimously through everybody. We looked for an extension in 2017, where I was going to be building my own home back there, plus 2 others. In the meantime, we were selling our home in Dedham. It fell through either way, and I ended up having some back issues, and I missed a date on November 17th to do an extension. I had been out for a little while. I had surgery the 29th. I'm back on the mend now, but I had about 2-3 months there I was down and out. So I missed the extension. I'm looking for another extension. I plan to start this project in the next 12 months to put my home and 2 other homes back there in Far Reach. We've purchased land there up to in the neighborhood of 45 acres off of Summer, Stone Meadow, Long Meadow, and Far Reach, how they abut to the big pond there. And I think we've done a nice job with the 45 acres where we've only put in, this will be, with these homes, it'll be probably in the 9 to 11 house range. So we've got some big house, areas in there that I think we've done a nice job, with the land and keeping the land to the integrity in which the neighborhood is, without putting a bunch of homes in. So with that, I asked you for an extension for 2 more years if I could, and I plan to have this project started within the next year.
Great, thank you. Starting with you, Deb, do you have any questions? Dave?
I have no questions.
Yeah, I have no questions. Bill? Chris?
None for me.
I move that we approve the applicant's request for a 2-year extension of the OSR DEIDR for Far Reach Road, map 03, lots 28, 29, 30, 23, until November 17th, 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So it passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you.
Agreed.
That was
Agreed.
fast.
Motion to close?
Do we have any other,
I think that he left.
I guess we're not going to do
Comprehensive
plan.
He was here for Gloucester Road,
He
for
was
Gloucester
here.
Road.
We're going to close the meeting?
Yes, the only thing is comprehensive plan, they're still looking to coordinate 2 public hearing, open house sessions, but we're trying to coordinate locations and dates, so we don't know the exact time yet, but we're looking at an afternoon, or daytime lunch afternoon one, and an early evening one.
Right. Thank you.
No other business.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All's in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? It's closed.